We just had the most amazing family vacation.
Let's go! Oh my God!
This is gorgeous.
Vrbo makes it super easy to find the perfect vacation house.
Losing precious moments to migraine? What if you could find moments like this or this? With Ajovy, a preventive treatment for migraine that reduces migraine days and can be taken quarterly or monthly. Do not use if you're allergic to Ajovy or its ingredients. Ajovy may cause allergic reactions. Get medical help right away if you have swelling or trouble breathing. May cause allergic reactions. Get medical help right away if you have swelling or trouble breathing.
Good afternoon, Mr. Peterman. Good afternoon, Mr. Peterman. Can you hear me? Hey, Ashley. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Herman.
Okay, perfect. I was trying to say hi to Mr. Peterman. I was worried that my connection wasn't going through, but everything is fine. Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
Emily, I don't hear you.
Hi, Herman.
Emily, I'm gonna make you a co-host just in case. Good.
Herman, we're not recording yet, right?
We are live already, yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I don't hear you. Nope. Did not hear you.
You talking about the mayor or the vice mayor?
Mayor.
I don't think the mayor's logged on.
The mayor is there. I see him.
Oh, he is. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Awesome.
but I cannot hear him.
I can't hear him either.
I can't see him.
Yeah, you can hear me now.
There you are.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. Good.
Almost look like I almost look like if I have the mayor's haircut.
We are live and streaming, so we are very technical on the technical side.
Just
Go ahead
missing Ruano and
Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
Mayor.
I'm gonna log out and log back in. I may have done something wrong.
Okay, we can hear you. Okay.
Vice Mayor, are you going to be on for the entire meeting?
I'm gonna do as much as I can, Mayor. I'm at the fire station, so we have a night training coming up, so it's a weird day today. But I'm gonna be listening in as much as I can. I might step out of the room, but I'll still have my headset on as much as I can. If I leave, I'll just let you know I'm stepping out. I got a call. Okay.
Got it. Do you want to run the meeting, or is that
No, go ahead. No, I'm fine. Just go ahead because of the of stepping in and out and all that stuff. Go ahead and just, if you're gonna be there for the meeting, just run it. I'm fine. Thank you.
I don't know.
Really
Go ahead.
appreciate
It's either because I might have to step out for a second as well. So it's either you or the council member that called the meeting.
That's fine. I think for consistency purposes, let the council member that called the meeting run it. That way, as I step in and out, I'll leave myself logged in, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'll be here.
Got it.
So
No,
I'll
I'll be
have to
listening.
rerun it.
I'll be listening to the entire thing. But I
Okay.
do have to step away for a second, but I'll still be listening. Hey, Councilman Rodriguez, are you there?
Yes, Mayor, I'm here.
Well, this is your meeting that you called. Go ahead and call the meeting to order and move forward with the sunshine meeting.
Okay. Is everybody here?
We're just missing Councilwoman Ruano. I'm trying to reach out to her now to see if she's going to be logging on later or right now.
And Councilman Dieguez?
He confirmed with me that he would be on, but let me.
Why don't we give him a few more minutes?
Ashley,
Yes.
the agenda packet that you sent me today is the
Yes.
agenda package. But do you have the actual agenda that you printed out for me, or is this what you printed out for me?
Yes, that's what was printed out.
No, I wanted.
I
the
can
actual budget.
resend it to you.
No, I have that. I just wanted the actual budget, the whole package. Because that's
Everything for the budget was attached to the sunshine meeting agenda. Do you want me
yeah,
to?
but that's not the whole
you-
budget. That's not the whole line item budget. Is
Oh.
that the whole line item budget that's on here, Ed?
I don't know what you're referring to, what you got today.
Okay, no, I didn't get it today. I got it the other day. I just wanted, this is the agenda package. Okay, yes.
Well, the
agenda. Okay, I got it. I see.
The agenda
what's on there.
package is being finalized and it'll be official and published tomorrow morning.
we got the original one. I got it. Thank you, Ashley. I got exactly what I needed. Thank you.
No problem.
Is Councilman Dieguez and Councilwoman Morano here yet?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, we'll give them 2 more minutes and then we'll start.
Ruano's logging on right now.
We'll wait a couple more minutes for Josh to log in.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Councilman Dieguez will be logging on at 6:45.
6:45. Okay. All right. So you guys want to get started, or you want to wait for Josh?
I don't mind waiting.
Okay. Vice Mayor,
Sir,
for this
Go ahead.
meeting, do you want to do we're going to do our moment of silence and pledge of allegiance?
sure. Absolutely.
You want to lead us in that, please?
Sure. Okay. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll have a moment of silence for our fallen firefighters, police officers, and military vets. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez.
Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments for this Sunshine meeting?
Not that I'm aware of. Do we have anyone for public comments, Herman?
No.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess we will just move on to the budget discussion. So obviously this meeting was called in order to look at the line item budget, similar to what we did last year. I thought it was a very fruitful discussion, and we were able to save the residents some money. I think it was a good idea based on the conversations that we were having at the last council meeting on, you know, budgetary issues and the millage and whether to give the rollback rate or not. And I think it would be a good practice to go through it. I know Councilman Dieguez at the last meeting identified I guess stricken from this budget for this year just because of the COVID uncertainties. And so I think I'd like to get him to come back and see. But if any of you have any line items specific that you would like to discuss regarding the budgets, we can go over them now. I know we have a couple other things that came up at yesterday's meeting, specifically regarding the Cultural Affairs Committee and the Economic Development Committee. that would be good for us to discuss tonight here while we're going through the budget to give staff direction in time for next Tuesday's meeting? I'm sorry, manager, not direction, discussion for the budget.
Yeah, and Lorenzo can probably speak to it more intelligently, but tonight's meeting, you can't really take votes and so forth.
Understood.
You can dissect and beat up and discuss, till the cows come home. But obviously, any changes then would have to be done with amendments on the item on next Tuesday night.
Understood. Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with what the town manager is saying. Tonight is just basically for you guys to take discussion. You cannot vote. You can kind of beat up the budget, and then whatever you guys kind of come up as consensus, then you guys can vote on next week. So that's all it is. This is just the ability, since it's a public meeting, and you guys are subject to sunshine, to be able to have your discussion and hash out your ideas.
Got it.
Councilman Rodriguez,
Yes, sir.
with respect to at least the ask from the Cultural Affairs Committee,
Yeah.
and I know the mayor, volunteered what his experience was last time that we did the cabinet, and he suggested looking for sponsorships. I just want to report that we were successful in locating sponsors for that cabinet case.
Excellent.
So that should not be an issue, and it should be completely funded this year without necessarily dipping into the town coffers. So it could put you at ease and put the rest of the committee at ease, and most importantly, the mayor at ease. That it's.
Did they already find the cabinet? Is that what you're saying, Louis?
No, I think
find a donor.
The suggestion was to find one, and I think we were successful in coming forward to that challenge. Now I hope we can apply that same standard across the board, right?
Yeah.
No, but I'm
because
saying,
if
did you say we were successful to find a cabinet for cultural affairs right now?
Yes.
From yesterday to today? Perfect.
That's exactly what I'm saying. But
okay, perfect.
What I also want to do is.
Hello? Councilman? No, there you are. No, you're muted. Is it me? Yep, it's me.
Council member, we can't hear you.
I froze there.
We can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me now?
I hear you just fine.
Okay.
Council member Collazo cut out about halfway, and we still can't hear him.
I think we lost him. There you are.
I'm here. I can hear, and I don't know to what point. I just wanted to make sure that that you guys were aware that we were able to locate sponsorship dollars for that cabinet.
That is great news. It's great news, and I'm sure Neil is going to be very happy with that. Okay. Does anyone have any specific line items that they want to discuss, similar to what Councilman Dieguez put forward or started discussing at the last meeting? Because I think when I was tallying up his items, it was about 100, 110, something like that. Anyone have?
I believe one of the items he pushed forward had to do with our travel expenses. I don't know if that's one of the ones that you had on there.
Yeah, no, that was one of the ones that I had on there. Obviously, we did it last year. I have no problem doing it again this year. I think it's, in the year that we're having, I don't think any of us are going to be going to any of these events necessarily. But if that's a motion that we're going to make at the next meeting, I think we can discuss that here. I, for one, would have no problem with that.
So I'll just be saying this on that point. I'll definitely be using some of those dollars. I'll be flying after the organizational session. I'll definitely be going up to Tallahassee with our town manager to get a good view of what's going on. And there is a possibility that I might have to go up to Washington, D.C. for a hearing, for a congressional hearing on the zip code. There's a possibility that might happen. I spoke to Senator Rubio's staff, and they might be putting that forward, and there might be an amendment to the funding now in the USPS. So just putting that on people's radar. I think this is an issue where, the majority of the council doesn't want to use it. I think it's it's a choice, and but I'm definitely going to be using mine.
I agree with the mayor. I think that canceling the travel budget, I mean, it's not going to affect me, but it definitely will affect the new folks coming in, and we can give them the opportunity to go get the education and travel. They may not travel by plane. We don't know what the future has for the next fiscal year in reference to classes and travel, but I think that it's something that eliminating it would be just not my suggestion. We're talking about $1,500 per council member. It's not a huge line item, but I think that it's a necessary one. And then if not, we're going to have to start scrambling and looking for those dollars if we decide to, or you guys decide that you need to travel for some reason. Again, we're talking about less than $60,000. I understand they're tax dollars, but they're still travel coordinations that may need to happen in order to get the town's business done. And I've never been a fan of that in the last 8 years. And I think that that's something that we need to continue to have in the budget. That's just my 2 cents.
But it is a choice, Vice Mayor. And I think you've heard already from council members that want to make the choice of not using that and giving it back.
Yeah, that's fine. If they want to give it back, that's fine. But I think that you have two voices, or excuse me, not two voices. You have definitely one voice that'll be coming in, a new person, and then depending on who else gets elected to the other seat, or stays. But I think it's unfair to put that on them. And they may not financially have the money to do that. I think that it's one of those things that we need to have in reserves. But if each council member decides to give it up, that's fine. As far as for me, I think that the next incoming person should be able to make that decision. They won't have that opportunity, so I make that decision for them now to keep that money in case they need to travel and support city issues.
Yeah, Mayor, I think you should make it an option for each council member. I think during the legislative session this year, we're looking at possibly traveling in February or March. I am one that I think our town should be represented, and we should continue to advocate for what we decide with infrastructure projects, et cetera, like we did last year. And I think our town should be represented, and our residents as well, by the council and the mayor. And again, it's a choice of the council member if they want to opt in to go during the legislative session to lobby for our projects. I'm one that I want to continue representing our town in Tallahassee. I know I didn't have the ability to go last year, but I would like the opportunity to go this year.
Yeah. So again, that travel budget, similar to what the vice mayor said, it's not going to make or break the budget, right? It's not a line item that's going to save the residents pretty much money at all if you break it down. So the key question was relating to the millage and the rollback, which was what sparked this discussion. How much money would we have to cut from our balanced budget right now in order to give that rollback rate if we wanted to do that? And from my review of the budget, our staff again has done a phenomenal job making it as lean as possible, and not a lot of wasted tax dollars, actually zero waste tax dollars on this budget here. The only thing, obviously, I've mentioned it multiple times, the only thing I don't like about this budget is that we don't necessarily address the payback of the monies that we borrowed last year. But I understand that this is maybe not the year to do that, and whatever. But as long as we appreciate that those funds have to be repaid, we're on track. Manager, correct me if I'm wrong. We're on track for the 20% reserve. We had 3 years to do it. We're inching closer. We took a step back last year, but we're inching closer to that.
Yeah, and if you remember from when we had this last sunshine meeting, that I spoke to you about the revenue where the state adjusted one of their revenue streams to us that generated another 200 and some odd $1,000. And in this latest version of the budget, that 200 and some odd $1,000 is in a contingency line. We didn't reallocate it and spend it with new items. We left it in a contingency line, and we expect that to flow through next fiscal year into fund balance. And so while you're 100% correct, there's no direct repayment in this budget. We hope and expect that that $238,000 flows through next fiscal year and into fund balance. So it's a indirect way of allocating some portion of the money that was borrowed this fiscal year.
Okay.
And it also meets the objective of what you stated, right? Getting closer to that 20% mandate in fund balance that we were asked to do with the ordinance that was passed by this council.
Councilman Rodriguez,
Sir.
your opening remarks, you mentioned something that you were working with staff on, and you also mentioned the rollback rate. Did staff get you, if we were to go through this budget trimming or exercise, did staff get you that number of what that would be?
No. How much we would need to cut back in order to do that?
Right.
No.
Can staff give us that number now?
Is that to go to, if we were to go to the rollback rate, what would that represent? How much would we have to cut?
Correct.
Yeah, in Councilman Rodriguez's opening remarks, he talked about how we got here, right? How we got to this point, and he mentioned the rollback rate, and then he talked about some of the discussions he's been having with staff. And I remember, I don't know, Councilman, I don't want to speak for you, but you mentioned something about the rollback rate, and did you know what the No,
I have not been working with staff on anything other than reviewing the budget. I have not asked them for that savings, what it would cost us if we did roll it back, and what we would have to cut from the budget. I've made it very clear that I don't think we should give the rollback rate, especially with the uncertainty that we're facing with state funding. I don't think it's something that we should do this year. And I'm going to stick to that opinion unless we can find in the budget enough things that will not detrimentally affect our level of service to our residents and cover that loss that we're going to have if we did issue the rollback rate.
So what would that be?
I don't know. I need to ask. The staff
Well,
needs to
if we were to go to the, let me tell you that if we were to go to the rollback rate, we would lose $356,000 in revenue. So what would we do then, right? We would obviously eliminate that $238,000 in contingency. So any plan of trying to get closer to the 20% fund balance basically goes out the window.
200 and how much, manager?
and then-
How much was it? 200 and
38.
To what?
238 that we are budgeting here to go into contingency.
Right.
Then we would also, then on top of that, we'd have to cut an additional $118,000 in other things. Now, what, you know, and this is the dilemma that I'm sure all 7 of you have to deal with every year, and any elected official at the local level has to deal with. The reduction of the millage rate, no way how you see it, it is always a one-way street. It's very rare there would have to be a catastrophe, a crisis that hasn't been seen before, for people in your position to have to face that dilemma of having to increase the millage rate. I think it is almost, it would have to be a catastrophe. So I would just caution against the reduction of the millage rate, because it's not something that is that easy to, this year we reduce it because we have this contingency fund, then next year we increase it. It is something that people in your position would be very difficult in the future. People who will someday sit in your seats, to be able to increase it someday in the future. It's almost like a one-way valve. I don't, and I just, I just wanted to throw that out there, and I caution you against that because it's politically very, very difficult, absent any kind of severe crisis.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Manager. And then the opposite of that question, to make us whole, and back to Councilman Rodriguez's opening remarks, right? The fact that we leveraged some money from our fund balance to make it through last year without necessarily dipping into an increased millage rate. How much would we need to be at to make us whole?
Melissa, I need your help on this one. I know we transferred last year, I think 420 from 420 and
If I may-
like $830,000 total. You have that easily accessible?
So we,
Go ahead, Melissa.
we transferred 420,000 from our capital projects funds from MLOP. And we also took an amount of 431,000 from fund balance in order to balance the current year's budget.
So Melissa, to Councilmember Collazo's question, my rough math here real quick on my phone, if we were to, of the 800 and some odd thousand that we borrowed from the two funds, if we take away contingency, we'd have to raise millage up to an amount that would generate an additional $612,000. Can you tell me how much higher the millage? Is that the question you were going to, Councilmember Collazo?
No, not necessarily. I wasn't looking at the millage number, but I was looking at the bottom line, the 620. So then we could extrapolate the 612. We could extrapolate a millage rate, but I was just trying to see both extremes, right? Because we're having two different conversations. We're having a conversation about making us whole, and we're having a conversation about rollback, right? If we at least that's the conversations or the terms that I've used or heard here in discussion. I've heard people talking about what would it take if we nip and tuck here to get us down to a rollback rate. And I understand that your comments, Mr. Manager, and why you advise against that being a one-way street, and it's very difficult to go backwards. And I've heard the other conversation, the other logic is, we're trying to repay and make us whole to those funds that we took out of our savings last year. The third number that I was looking for is how much would it take to get us to that 20% benchmark?
Melissa, I think that if we take into account the 238 that we hope and expect that will flow into fund balance through contingency, how much more will it take to get us to the 20%? And Councilmember Collazo, every year it's a different number, it's a different bogey, right? Because that percent is as a percent of your general fund expenditures. So this year, it's not like you can go and say the dollar amount that I give you now this year is going to hold true next year, because next year's budget may be a little bigger, a little smaller. So the numbers, they're dynamic. Every year, it's because we're talking about a percentage, and you have to say a percentage of what? This year's number, 20%, is going to be based on this year's budget. Next year's 20% will be based on next year's number. But we can give you what that number would be if we were giving it or comparing it to what based on this year's budget. Melissa, are you there?
yes, sir, I'm here. Can I have
Speak
a
up,
moment so I
speak
can
freely.
calculate that?
Yeah, that's all right. I know that if we take into account contingency, the number goes up to like 18 point something percent this year, right? If we consider that amount. Is that accurate? Yeah, council member, if we take this year without the contingency, we're at 17.01% fund balance. If we add the 238 from contingency, we're up to 18.3. So your question, I guess, is what do we, if we added, how do we get that extra 1.7% to get to 20%? What would that represent in dollars? How much more dollars?
Like 500,000, a little bit under 500,000. I'm doing it in my mind.
Yeah.
Like 400,000.
Melissa, what? Let me see. What would be 20% of the $2.9 million that we have there? I guess that's the right question. No, I'm sorry. That's the current fund balance. 20% of the 17 million.
That's 3,471,000. 20% of our current
Yes,
budget.
3454, right?
Yes,
34.
that's correct.
3471 is what I got. But maybe
Oh, you are correct.
Yeah, I was looking at the wrong column.
But it's around there. 347.
Yep, you're right.
Okay.
3471, right?
That
So
that would
if-
represent a 20%. If our fund balance was at 20%, we would have 3.47.
And if we consider now that we have, we would need, Councilmember, another $280,000. Councilmember Collazo, I think that's the answer to your question. 280,000.
Is that in addition to what is estimated to be put in there this year with this current budget that we're looking at?
Correct. Right, because this year, the contingency amount is 238. That's what bumps it up to 18.3%. So to get from 18.3 to 20%, we would need an additional 280,000.
Okay, so that's for the fund balance. And then to make us whole, how much is it to pay completely the MLOP and the 431 from fund balance?
Well, remember, I mean, that isn't repaying fund balance, everything we took. I think that's just bumping it up to 20%.
Yeah, you can't put, so we have 238,000, that's contingency. We can't put it in both columns. We can't say we're using it to fund balance 20%. And then if you did that, right, you would use, let's assume you used all 238 to pay down the 851 that we had borrowed. We'd have 613 left.
613.
And that would be, I guess,
Yes,
if we were
that is
paying
absolutely
all,
correct.
if we were paying all 238 to fund balance, we would still have 420 from owed to the MLOP capital fund.
Right.
And we would have 238, we would have 193 owed to fund balance to get us back to where we were last year.
Got it. What was that? No, I'm sorry, I didn't write it down. What was that, Jeff? What was Councilman
So
Rodriguez?
420, if we paid all 238 to fund balance,
Right.
we would have 613 that would be left outstanding. 420 to MLOP and 193 to fund balance. And that would repay the money that we borrowed last year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, if that's the obviously we can't take direction, but I do like the frame of thought that Councilman Collazo was going into. I think it's important to get that fund balance to 20%. I mean, there's some other stuff that I do think should get more funding. I'll give you guys an example. Of the street lights, something that's important to Councilman Collazo. We got to do a better job of improving our street lights, our street lighting study. I know there's $72,000 in the budget right now for maintenance and repairs of street lights, which is nowhere near to what we really need to enhance the lighting in our community. There's areas of our community that the lighting is really, really, really poor. I think the study showed that in certain areas. So I wanted to make a point of that. The other thing too, I've been driving around today. I drove around to a bunch of different places around town. Our street signs are in really, really bad situation. I saw some signs today that you can't even tell what street it is. signs that are facing, that I saw them, they're facing eastbound, for different roads. You can't even tell. They're completely washed out. And we have, I think only in this past year, we've only repaired 19 street signs, so far. That's nowhere near to what we need. So, those are some of the needs that I've been seeing. You know, I do want to see, I agree with Councilman Collazo. That's the thought process he wants to go to. We have to keep boosting our reserves, something that Councilman Collazo, Councilman Dieguez talked about before, but we got our street lighting study that we did, we got to find a way to fund that. I mean, $72,000 in maintenance and repairs is a drop in the bucket. And the amount of residents that called me about the issues with lighting in their areas is a lot. And the amount of residents that I've been talking to that tell me about the street signs, I saw them today personally, dozens of them.
Mayor, we discussed this the other day with the manager. We were at the ribbon cutting. When we were at the ribbon cutting of 60th Avenue, we discussed that street signs facing east and west are getting decimated by the sun, and so they're not practical. The stickers we're using and it's gone. And I've got multiple complaints with that, so I completely agree with you. The street signs is something that we brought that data to the manager's attention that day. I don't know if he remembers, on 60th Avenue when we did the ribbon cutting of the bike path. But there's a lot throughout the town that needs to be replaced.
We repaired 19 only this past. I looked at the performance measures. So, and there's a lot more that we need. There just isn't. Obviously, there's not enough money to go around. So, just wanted to put that on the record, because I know I want to see our lighting improved sooner rather than later, and I want to see our street signs improved while at the same time boosting our reserves if possible.
Mr. Manager, and thank you, Mayor, especially on the street lighting issue, and in particular, there's a sensitive area down Holly Road that is very, very dark, and continuing to get calls on that issue. And I was going to work with the manager to identify, see if there was any money, not even next year, this year, to see if there was any way that we can address some of these pockets. The last time that item came up and it came voted before council, and I remember Mr. Acosta did a wonderful job in kind of putting that project in front of us. It was a significant lift. I mean, it was in the hundreds of thousands if we were going to go back. Is it possible, Mr. Manager, to revisit that and maybe start targeting maybe pockets, kind of almost like we're trying to do with the stormwater, target some of those pockets like Holly Road, some of those areas that are most impacted, that have been left basically in the dark, and maybe start creating a pathway to that?
Yeah, I mean, we have the study that that Public Works worked on with the consultant, and we've identified all of the areas that are deficient in lighting, and the report, the consultant's report, gave us different pathways to do it. One was to just go ahead and change out all the fixtures to bigger fixtures. The other one was to put in new poles. And ultimately, we believe that the hybrid one was to first start and change out and increase the wattage and the size of the fixtures of the existing poles, and then do another study to see if there's still deficiencies, and then implement new poles. But ultimately, it's all money. This is the exercise we're going through. So if we only have X number of dollars, and that doesn't allow for us to install new poles or to change or increase the size of the fixtures at the top of the existing poles, you know, it is what it is, you know.
Do you have that amount? Do you have the amount that Public Works, you see, because I think if we look at it from just like we looked at the issue of reforestation in Westlake, right? If you looked at that issue in one pop, and you said, well, it's going to take us $500,000 to reforest Westlake. Well, we broke it up over 5 or 6 years, and now look, we're almost $500,000 investment in that area, and we've been able to do it $100,000 at a time, targeting some of the worst areas first and moving it up. I like that approach to managing big projects and doing phased in. And you know, there can be arguments both ways. You know, is there some savings by doing it in one lump sum? But if we were to truncate it and take off smaller bite-sized portions, I don't know if we ever, you know, went into it like that. And that's one of the issues that I've been looking forward, at least to the strategic plan retreat, because I think just like that, there's other ways that we can address some of these issues that certain residents have a valid point, right? Whether it's drainage, because I know Councilwoman Ruano and Councilman Dieguez, they have to look at homeowners in the eye and say, look, sorry, we want to address this flooding issue, and we understand you have water coming into your garage, but there's no money in the budget. I think we have to find solutions, and sometimes those solutions can be cutting it down to smaller bite-sized portions. And I just wanted to see if we took that approach on that issue with the street lighting.
I mean, no matter what, we would have to increase our budget to account for that. Whether we increase it a little bit and then we spread it out over several years, or we increase it or find some other mechanism. The thing with some of these other things that we've been able to accomplish, like storm drain and so stormwater, is that we've gotten money from somewhere else. But I mean, I think that our grant manager, she does a great job of shaking the bush and looking for money for a lot of our needs. And she's been very successful with getting a lot of stormwater, especially from FEMA or from the state. But there isn't a whole lot of grant opportunities. While we're always looking, there aren't a lot of grant opportunities for lighting. Now, there was, I believe that when we went to the LEDs, part of that or all of that was paid for. There's cost efficiency, then there's grant opportunities to go to LEDs, like what we did with Royal Oaks Park. But just to like now, and maybe what we did is we underestimated or overestimated the wattage of the fixtures that we used. But obviously it's always easier to take it little by little, but then you drag out the pain and it makes it longer. But some of these other things, there's grant opportunities with lighting, as far as adding new poles, just because it's dark. That is something that is harder to come by, but we're always looking for those opportunities. So there's either we allocate more money from other sources now in the budget, or we continue to look for those opportunities from external sources.
Can I ask you, can we use PTP funds for street lighting?
I think it's Melissa or Kay, you may be better. I believe only if it's in conjunction with the road project, not just, like if you're redoing the road, you can put the lights in there. But I don't think an existing road with no other problems, I don't believe that you can do street lighting. Melissa or Kay or Carlos Acota, if you know.
I seem to remember that our former transportation manager had mentioned that street lighting was not something that PTP could be used for. Probably though, unless it was new road construction.
Right.
That I remember.
That's what I understand.
Yeah. Now they could do a road project to repave or something. Just wanted to opine with that.
I know we have a line item in the expenses of the PTP for electricity for streetlights, but that's the actual utility.
That's correct.
Correct.
That is correct.
So, but can we find that out? Because I remember somewhere, maybe it was in a workshop or something that I attended, that where they said that we could use those funds for street lighting because it enhanced pedestrian walkways. So because it was used as an enhancement to a walkway, those funds could be used for street lighting.
We'll find out the answer to that question.
Because that might help us in the future. That might allow us to free up some of those dollars.
No doubt, but every penny we take from PTP for this, that means it's $1 less that we're putting towards some of our other projects. So everything is a zero-sum game. So no matter, it's not like just because we use PTP doesn't mean that we create more PTP dollars. So by using PTP for something like this, it means that we're not using it for other things, other capital projects that we already have it earmarked for.
Right. No, I completely understand. But sometimes I think we can prioritize maybe some of these areas that are, a small area that is in need of lighting that we don't have the funding for right now. We might be able to prioritize that instead of creating a budget line item and finding dollars somewhere else. Some of these PTP funds are allocated to projects that are you know, in the future, or that we're waiting on, if we can use a small amount of that for a small project like this, that might be more productive right now.
May I?
Go ahead, Kay.
Actually, back in 2017, 2018, we used PTP funds for the LED light retrofit. And in the budget, we also use PTP funding to pay for the utilities. So yes, it can be used.
Councilwoman Morano, thank you so much, because I think that's one of the opportunities that we may have, right, in retweaking these things and going back to the strategic plan of prioritizing. You know, those are the types of complaints that we get that can have an immediate impact on somebody's quality of life.
Right.
And that's the type of reprioritization I've been looking forward to. And you and I, who've been probably sitting on that dais the longest, but have had, you know, been chomping at the bit to talk about that in the strategic plan. So I love that idea.
Can I also state, Councilwoman Piazzo, that right now, PTP dollars, all of PTP funding is earmarked for 59th Avenue at this time. Just want to put that out there, that the PTP funding is earmarked for 59th Avenue extension.
Thank you, Kay.
For the next 2-3 years.
Thank you, Kay. Mr. Peterman, did we have, I remember that we spoke about the fact that we had secured funding through a grant. Does that grant, is that in addition to our PTP money, or?
For what are you, which project are you?
59th Avenue extension?
Yeah, 59th Avenue, it has funding from multiple sources. As Kay stated, well, first of all, we have a big chunk of it from FDOT. FDOT is providing us a big part of the money. We also have the PTP money, and we've also applied for impact fee dollars from Miami-Dade County.
Okay, but we will be using PTP dollars, because that was one of the questions that I had on,
Yes.
went through the budget.
For
Okay.
59th Avenue. Yeah, as Kay stated, and in fact, what we do is I think it's once a month, we have a meeting internally that is, we look at all of our capital projects, and we look, you know, several fiscal years out, and we look at all of these individual funding sources like PTP or grants or what have you, and we kind of forecast out where these dollars are coming from. So that's why Kay is stating that we already know that PTP dollars are allocated towards 59th Avenue for the next couple years until we complete that project.
Okay, so maybe I had misunderstood, because when we had the discussion and I understood that it was going to be funded through FDOT dollars, FDOT grants, and the impact fees that we were going to be lobbying for. I didn't realize that there was going to be that there was a portion of it that was coming out of our budget.
Right. Yes, there is. They're local funds, and I can put together. We have a budget only for 59th Avenue, and I could forward that to all of you so you could see that there's multiple funding sources for 59th Avenue.
Okay, do we, I don't know, Kay, if you have it in front of you, maybe if you're looking at it, do you know how much PTP funds are going into this 59th Avenue extension, I'm sorry? You said that it was going to be a few years in the future, that we were already earmarking these dollars. Do you have like a dollar amount? Because in this year's budget, it's 625,000 of this budget that we're looking at now for this coming up fiscal year. So if it's 3 years, is it going to be 1.8? Is it the same amount every year?
Hold on a second. I'm opening up the budget that we have for
18, Councilwoman Morano. I'm looking at it here. It's on page 93 of the packet. I guess it's six. It has a couple different pages, but the point being that it says transfer capital transportation for 2018-19. It was 715.
Okay.
But they may not have all been 59th Avenue. 20 FY20, it says transfer for 59th Avenue was 475,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
And for this year, it's 625.
And in the coming years, in the next 2 years, it should be 650,000.
For 2 years. For the next.
For 2022. For 2022.
Okay.
So 625 in fiscal year 2021,
Right.
and 650 in 2022.
In 2022, plus the 425, plus the 715. So we're looking at about $2.5 million of town monies that's going into the 59th Avenue extension. Okay, and I'm sorry that I digress. I was under the impression that this was fully funded through impact fees and grants. So I realize now that that some of these monies, right, could be used also for sidewalks and lighting and other things that are also priorities in the town. So I guess we've handicapped some of this money into the future a little bit, but that's okay. Thank you for the clarification.
I think nobody noticed, but Councilman Dieguez joined from the boardroom, it looks like, or
The conference room.
conference room.
Yeah, sorry about that. We just installed this whole thing, and this is my first time using it, and I was trying to figure out some menu options that were.
Looks good, man.
It looks very nice.
You look very in charge.
Thank you.
I like it.
I guess I'll make my entry this way. Can somebody just please provide me a brief overview of what we've covered? When I came in initially, I know that Councilman Goyaso was in the middle of asking questions about the contingency and how that played in with the reserves, and how maybe that could also play in with paying back some of the money for the park. At least that's what I was able to glean from that. And then Councilwoman Ruano, as I understand it, was asking questions about PTP and what it could pay for, and I guess also how it was applied to 59th Avenue. But is there somebody that can just briefly synthesize where we're at so I can get caught up?
Yeah,
Again, I apologize.
No, I can tell you where we're at. So what we started with was the contingency of 238 is what we were looking at as funds that we can use to repay the borrowed funds that we had from fund balance last year and MLOP. So it's $238,000 is in contingency, which is an increase in state revenues that the manager received from the state of Florida as a projected revenue increase. So that was put into contingency. So assuming that we were to place all of that money into fund balance, which was not the recommendation of the town, but this is assuming we did that and we put all 238, we would only have $613,000 left to repay the monies that we borrowed last year from MLOP and fund balance. And then we got into the PTP funds and what you heard about the 59th Avenue and the streetlights.
Did we get I guess part of that was when I was fumbling with the Roku here, but did we ever get clarification as far as whether or not PTP could go to pay for adding streetlights, for example?
I think
Yes,
Kay said that we could use it, that we had used it for retrofitting in the past and that we could use it for new.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be tied to a new road project. It could be just to add lights or like you said, retrofitting existing lights.
Based on that information that we were given, yes.
Well, we did use it for retrofitting the streetlights, but I will need to confirm that, that is just for streetlights.
Okay. All right, we won't hold you to it, Kate. We'll just get that information.
I will confirm and get back to you for sure.
Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
Councilman Rodriguez, for the benefit of Councilman Dieguez, the only thing that we also covered, I think, was the remaining balance or to get us to that 20%. If we were to transfer it. And I know you were taking notes. Do you have that, Councilman Rodriguez, or if the manager can chime in? Because I think we went over that number as well.
280 was.
Yes.
Correct.
So Councilman Dieguez, to get us that 20% threshold, which I think you sponsored, if we were to put the 238 into fund balance, I think that was the caveat, right? If we were to put the total 238 into fund balance, it would be another 280 to get us that 20% threshold.
Right. But then we'd still have the 420 out there, because if we applied all 238 to fund balance, what we would have left to bring us back to where we were before we borrowed the money. Hold on one second. 431 minus 238. We'd have 193, right? So assuming we put all that contingency money into the fund balance, we'd still have 193 short of what we should have had we not borrowed the money last year. And then we'd be 280. So we'd need about another 90,000 to get us to that 20%.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, guys. I guess going back to the questions I brought up in the first budget hearing, starting with I think it was the 47,000 in the cost savings that we realized by not having a runoff election. Where has that money been allocated?
Melissa, you can chime in, but I believe that we have already taken that out of this budget does not reflect a runoff expense.
That is
Melissa?
correct. It does not reflect. That is correct. The budget does not reflect the 47,000 for the runoff. It
And
was
where did we
removed
move?
once we found out there was no runoff.
Okay, and where was it that we moved that money to?
What do you mean moved? I mean, from the very first time that you saw this budget to when you saw it last Tuesday, there was a lot of moving parts, pluses and minuses. So it's hard to say we took that and moved it here.
I guess then with the 47,000 that was originally budgeted for a runoff expense, when that was deleted, where did those amounts go? Do we have a record of that, or did we just say, okay, we have 47,000 extra, go ahead and allocate it throughout?
No, and you asked the same question just in a different way. So with all due respect.
He's a lawyer. He's a lawyer.
Yeah.
Don't blame him.
He's trying to get me. There's a lot of moving parts, so it's hard to say that just these 47, that was not the only thing that was changing at any given time. When that was changing, we were getting estimates from the state. Our forecast for expenses were changing. So there was a lot of moving parts from the very first time you saw these numbers was the first time we had that first sunshine meeting. From then until you saw this proposed budget last Tuesday, a lot of things have changed. So it's hard to say that we took those 47 and put them over here. It just went into the pot, and then the pot changed as things changed throughout the last the last month or month and a half.
Okay, so basically, yeah, we just don't know exactly where that money ended up. I mean, obviously we used it for something, but it's not like you said, okay, X amount of that 47 went here, X amount of that 47 went over there. Like, okay, yeah, because I just try to figure out, since that was 47,000, was initially budgeted for that. I thought it would be useful to know, where, perhaps we can reallocate that as opposed to just kind of, I guess now it's somewhere in there, right? Like
it's already in the pot. And then, it's all the money goes into one pot, and from that pot, money gets allocated to the different line items. So and like I said, from the first time, the first version of this budget that you saw at the first Sunshine meeting to now, there's been a lot of changes, and there have been pluses and there have been minuses. And now this balanced budget is what you had before you that you had before you last Tuesday, and still have before you.
Okay, and with respect to the committee budget questions that I had about, for example, the haunted house for Halloween, I know we were gonna wait for our YATF to meet again the following day after our first budget hearing, and they were supposed to come back with some kind of proposal as to how they were going to spend that money. You know, and to kind of get us some numbers as to how much it would take, right? I mean, my recollection, I do believe, is correct on that. Have they met yet? Have they told us, okay, you know, we're not going to do a haunted house this year, but I think somebody mentioned that they were considering a drive-through event. So I guess my question would be, if they do that event, how much is that going to cost? You know, would it come in lower than what they're asking for?
I mean, I think the chairperson of that committee spoke last night, and they are looking to reallocate, I believe almost every committee is looking to repurpose their dollars to have a COVID-safe event, but not just blowing it up and saying, okay, hey, we can't do these things now. I believe that all of them are trying to repurpose their events and reconfigure them in a way that it's COVID safe. So I mean, I think we heard the chairperson last night mention that that they're looking to do some type of an event for Halloween that may be some type of a drive-through event. But every one of these committees, I think, is working towards that goal of still continuing to do community events, but in a COVID-safe manner.
No, I understand that, and some of them may come back more expensive, some of them less expensive. For example, the movies in the park are coming back more expensive because of the larger screen and the audio technology that they have to utilize for people to enjoy the movie from their car. But at least as I'm sitting here thinking about it, if you're not going to do an event that has thousands of kids and parents at our park, right, that involves constructing this maze and paying for utilities and all sorts of these other things, paying for, you know, a stage and so on and so forth, if those expenses go away, wouldn't also the cost decrease overall of doing a drive-through event that might involve a smaller production, you know, in terms of some kind of mini stage or something for people to go through? Obviously the candy is still something that will have to be purchased, but again, generally, wouldn't it lead to less expenses and therefore a cost savings of some kind, that it wouldn't require the full amount?
Are you talking specifically about the haunted house?
Yeah,
or...
that was one of the particular committee items that stuck out to me as an event that I'm not sure yet.
Councilman Dieguez,
Yes.
if I can highlight.
Of course, go ahead.
One second, because I got the committee chair on this phone. Brian, you're on speaker.
Wait, do you want me to join Zoom so it's clear?
If you want to join in Zoom, I'll send you the login so you can join in, and then you can explain. Okay, so join in and then you can explain yourself as the chair of YATF. Okay.
I guess we'll wait for him to chime in then.
Yeah, no, I think I believe they had a meeting. And
Okay.
They want to do a drive-through haunted house using some of our existing Halloween stuff. Just remember that a lot of our existing stuff was destroyed during the rains that they had during Halloween the last couple of years, and they had a plan to stagger the tents so that the drive-by, you can see stuff on the right side and stuff on the left side. And then if the child was scared, they'd put like the haunted, the more spooky stuff on one side of the tents at Ana G. Mendez University. So I think they wanted to do drive-by Halloween.
So they were going to do a drive-by within the parking lot then?
Within the parking lot, right.
Okay.
And then let the people drive to the event. Another option that they were discussing for a while was like a Halloween drive-by that the committee would do throughout the town, but I think that would be more expensive and logistically a lot harder. Something similar to what they did for the for the Christmas candy cane event with Santa Claus. So, but he can better explain if you want to hold off on that and move on to another item.
Yeah. So then, I guess I don't know if Gladys said is on the line. I'm sure she is. But have you heard anything from Neighborhood Improvement as far as what they're planning to do, for example, with the community bike rides?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Councilman Dieguez, the last I heard from Chairman Rudy Lloredo was that they are going to wait until it is safe to meet in person. So they're not making any decisions at this time.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
So now, trying to remember what, okay. Yeah, well, that really, I guess, while we wait for the chair to log on, I guess that kind of really answers my questions for now. I think what I'm going to do is draft a letter to go out tomorrow to the committee chairs, asking them to at least provide me with some feedback as to how these fall events in particular are going to be modified, because I think that's important as we go to set the final budget. I mean, I would be surprised if the committee budget for, is completely unaffected, because again, we're not really doing in-person events. So I just would be, surprised if that stays intact. So I just am curious to see what it is that they're planning to do, and whether it's going to really cost as much as it would as an in-person event. So obviously some of them will incur a bigger cost for reasons, that are just, again, like the drive-in movie theater, but I just would love to hear from them more detail as to how they're going to explain maintaining the same expenditure level when, again, most of these events are not going to be taking place, most certainly not during their normally scheduled time. So I'll work on drafting a letter. In the meantime, I'll save any further questions for the chair when he logs on.
Ed, I have a question.
He's logged on already, Councilman Dieguez.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, Councilman Alvarez, I don't know if you would prefer to go first, or if your question was directed to me or towards staff or whatever.
No, let's go ahead and wait for Brian to clarify provide some clarifications to the questions you asked, and then I'll jump in. Mine is related to committee and public safety, so I'll jump in after Brian's done. Thanks.
No problem. You got it, man. Chair Rodriguez, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you guys tonight?
Doing well, thank you. How about you?
I'm good. So I was told that you guys wanted me to clarify Halloween a little bit more.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Basically, the question is, obviously, we're not doing an in-person horror house this year, or concert or anything like that. So I just wanted to get a better understanding of how the committee is going to restructure this event, as a way of both understanding the amount that's being requested for it, and just to better understand what that event is going to look like for the fall. Obviously, you've all done a good job up to now as far as adapting these events, but I just wanted to get more detail as far as what is going to be involved in some of these.
Of course. So the committee voted on doing a drive-through type Halloween event, similar to the food distribution events that we have going on in the town with Feeding South Florida. Instead of doing a food distribution, it would be more of a candy distribution. I know it's hard to meet with everyone because we are limited on meetings, but most of the ideas that we've had so far is to have different tents set up in Ana G. Mendez University in their parking lot, and create a kind of drive-through experience with different tents, decorated Halloween themed, as well as have different sponsors come in and have their own tents, and also decorate their tents, and do something like that. I don't know if we're gonna have a scare type of area. I know there were talks of doing maybe at one point splitting, since we are in a big parking lot, splitting the drive-through. One side will be for older kids or anyone who would want to go maybe through like a scare zone type area, and then the other one would be more candy for younger kids that may not want to go into that scary area. The reason that we asked for 15, usually we ask for a lot more for this event. I believe we've asked for like 25, 30 before for this event, but we decided to ask for 15 this year. And I think 15 should be enough, or hopefully it's enough to pull off this event. We have to remember we pay a lot of money for candy and decorations in the past. We've had rain and a lot of our decorations do get destroyed, as well as costumes because of rain and mold. So a lot of stuff does have to be replaced, but hopefully we could be good stewards with the money and get enough sponsorships to try to save the town a little more money, because I know that's the plan for the town right now. We are in a difficult time where money is a little tight, but we have planned to do this social distance, safe for everyone, and it's something to get the kids out of the house and something for them to look forward to. You know, everyone is locked up in their house, and kids are locked up they can't go to school. So it's kind of something, hey, bring kids out safely in their cars with their families, enjoy an event where they'll get candy because you can't go trick-or-treating. So it kind of gives you that trick-or-treat aspect as well. How we plan to do this was basically having different time slots during the day. We don't know the exact times yet. We are still planning those times, but to have maybe about 100 cars per hour, and we would be charging a $5 fee just so we could secure those spots and have those people come when their time is allotted to come. So that's our whole strategy on trying to get people out there and trying to keep it organized. With that 15,000 as well, we would have to pay for, I guess, police because it is on a Saturday. So we might have to pay for off-duty police officers just to be at the event to keep the peace and, you know, keep things running smoothly. And that's about it. I know it's still a little early. We do have a lot of planning to do. Unfortunately, we can't really have many committee meetings. So it's a lot on myself and the liaisons to try to figure out how we're going to put this all together. But we do have support from a few sponsors already, as well as Ana G. Mendez University. They are on board to help us as well.
I appreciate that comprehensive explanation. I think I'm pretty happy at this juncture with what I'm hearing. What I would direct your attention to, and perhaps also our Director of Community and Leisure Services, there's a similar concept that was unveiled in Miramar. I don't know if it's a city-run event, but they are doing it at a city park, and it's kind of a similar concept as far as it being a drive-through haunted house. I think that having people show up at a lot of times, which is what that event is doing, actually would be a great idea, so you avoid some of the chaos that otherwise might ensue if you just make it a first-come, first-served type event. So I would encourage you and the liaison for your committee to go over the details of how they're putting together that event, and maybe there's something that you guys can use to help you structure your event. So just wanted to put that, thank you first of all, you know, for the explanation, and second, to put that on your radar. I'll go ahead and I'll forward glad you said the information for that event that I saw. I forgot the name of it now, but I'll locate it and I'll forward it to her to share with you guys.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that. That would be awesome. I know there's a few other events happening around, not only Miramar. I believe there's one in Tropical Park, if I'm correct. But that one is charging, I think, $30 a car or $45 per car. And, you know, we here in the town, usually our events are free or very minimal cost, so everyone could come out and enjoy it. It's not about the money at the end of the day to make money. It's about having people come out and enjoy what our town has to offer, especially our residents. And that's what the Youth Activities Task Force is trying to get through, to get involved with the youth, get involved with the kids, and, you know, have a great time. You know, Halloween only comes once a year, and we've been doing this event for 18 years, and it would be very sad to see this event go away. So thank you guys.
Do we still have the emergency orders in place that we can't congregate at our park facilities?
Are you speaking to me or the manager?
No.
No, I was directing the question to the manager.
Danny, I know that you're more familiar with the restrictions at the park facilities. What are the restrictions right now with they're limited to only certain types of activities, right?
Yes, so the current order that just was adopted on Monday at 6 a.m. Still limits for groups no more than 10 or more at the town parks or at any park in the county. But it does allow for limited activity uses. They just added league play and competition play for baseball and softball, but pretty much no other organized groups larger than 10 people.
So a Halloween event would not be allowed to be hosted at one of our facilities.
Yeah, I believe that's our current interpretation of the emergency order.
Okay, so do we know how it's being done at Tropical Park? I mean, I'm just wondering, I'm curious because it was mentioned that there was going to be a Halloween event at Tropical Park, so I thought maybe there was something different in the new orders that would allow us to use our facilities.
Yeah, I guess we would have to reach out to our colleagues over in the county. I believe it's Tamiami, it's not Tropical Park, and it could be on the youth fair grounds, so there might be a private-public partnership there, but we could always reach out to them.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be Miami. I apologize if I said it wrong.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to find out. Maybe there's something that they're doing a little differently than we are. So I'd love to know.
I know that that group had talked to Brian too, and they talked to the Culture Affairs Committee. Yeah, it's purely a drive-through, where they even have like the folks all dressed up or have like these pipes where they put the candy through and all that, so there's no contact, you can't get out of your car or anything like that. So I know there's a couple of those happening around the county. So
right. I would love if we were going to host some sort of drive-through event or a non-contact event. I would still like to host it at the park. I'd much rather do that so that we can at least have some sort of consistency with our traditions in the town. So if there's any way that we can, if it's a drive-through event that the youth activities is looking to put together and we could have it at the park like we do every year, I think that would be fantastic.
We'll explore that, Council.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have our Parks Department partner with the Youth Activities Task Force, see the details, and we'll make sure if we're able to do it at our park and it doesn't interfere with some of the other activities that are going on, right? Because we are already having baseball and other activities going on at the parks. I know baseball and softball doesn't affect Royal Oaks, but we'll explore that, and if we can make it happen at our facility, we'll work with them to make that happen.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Brian, you were going to say something? Maybe we lost Brian.
You lost him. I have him on speaker. He says that Brian, what was the issue with Anarchy Mendez?
Because of the restriction of having groups of people, we moved it to a private location because we couldn't do it in the park originally.
My concern, Councilwoman Morano, with using the parking lot there at the park. Right, it's less space. Anarchy Mendez is bigger, has the parking capacity. I completely agree with what you're saying about the direction of keeping it consistent in the same place. But I think Anarchy Mendez has a better parking lot than we do at West Park. And the entrance is easier. There's multiple entrances at Anarchy Mendez that we can direct cars in and cars out in different directions rather than one in and one out at either Royal Oaks Park or at Mary Collins. So, but Anarchy Mendez has always been becoming a big sponsor in the town, right, Brian? Is that the issue with Anarchy Mendez? Or
yes, he has reached out. He actually reached out to me. Originally, the company that came and reached out to me in Cultural Affairs, they wanted to do it there originally, and he said, hey, whatever happens, you guys have us. Even if you don't want to go with the company, the Youth Activities Task Force is welcome to use their parking lot. It's more space, and they're willing to work with us for whatever event we want to do there.
Yes.
What was the fee? There was a big fee. There was a big fee from that private company too.
It was
Council.
$45 per car.
$45 per car is what that private company was charging.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Brian, she says thank you. I'm relaying the message. Okay. All right. And Councilwoman Morano, if you don't mind, 1 second to the mayor and to the manager and maybe Claricel, are committees supposed to have mandatory meetings? I mean, can we arbitrarily just choose not to have a meeting because it's Zoom? I thought that I have to look at the committee rules and regs, but I thought there was a minimum amount of meetings that committees are supposed to have yearly. I'm not sure.
There are a certain number of meetings they're supposed to have, but obviously with the whole COVID-19, a lot of those are, there has to be flexibility with a lot of those mandates for a number of meetings and so forth.
No, I'm just concerned because it seems that every other committee is having meetings and they seem successful. I'm just trying to figure out why neighborhood improvement is not having at least one Zoom meeting to get things through. But
Mr. Manager, if I may.
Go ahead.
Vice Mayor, Neighborhood Improvement has chosen not to have their meetings. They've been given opportunities to meet when the other committee meetings are taking place, and the committee as a whole has chosen not to meet.
No, I understand what you're saying, Claricel. Thank you. I'm not putting that on the town. I'm asking why the committee has chosen to do that, and if does that violate any of the rules of the committees? And I don't understand. Every other committee seems to be having meetings. Elderly Affairs, which has probably the oldest selected adults in the town, in that committee seem to be having Zoom meetings. I don't know why, and I guess I'll reach out to the chair and ask. But I think that the committee needs to meet and they need to figure out what their plan is for the rest of the year. I think arbitrarily just the chairman making that decision for the committee is not correct. So it's something that we need to address, I guess, as a council, either in the next meeting or in the next few meetings. The new council members need to address it, but why aren't they meeting? And I mean, is there any violation of the rules for them not meeting is all I'm asking. So it's some research that we'll have to do, and we'll just leave it at that. Let's get back to the budget.
Ed, I have a question. Have you guys been able to do a cost analysis this year with all the limited activities that we haven't had through our committees and the hiring on off-duty officers for public safety that they've patrolled and supervised the meetings? Have you done a comparison of like off-duty for, Halloween, for the bike rodeo, for all these other activities that we've had? And do you have an idea of what the cost? Because I'm imagining from March all the way to to today, to September, there must be a nice amount of money that the town has saved on off-duty officers for community events.
Yeah, I could tell you that thankfully we've had that savings because we have had increased overtime exposure for COVID-related things like enforcement of emergency orders, et cetera. So thankfully, we've had that now. The windfall, if you want to call it that, may happen once we are able to complete our claims with the CARES Act money and or with FEMA. So there may be some savings there. But right now, any savings that we've had from not using overtime for the school in the morning or the off-duty events and things of that nature, they've been offset by new exposure with overtime that's been needed for COVID-related patrols and so forth, and enforcement.
And one more question. I believe last year when we were doing the sunshine discussion, last year was the highest year that we were paying for town hall. Is this year, remember the payments that we had that I think last year was the balloon? I guess we were having that discussion, and then Mayor Sid had mentioned that as the upcoming years progress, we're gonna start tailing off. Is this year's, what we have allocated, or the payment we have to make for town hall, is it still at the same level as it was last year? I think I want to say it was up there, but I remember this discussion where we're at the peak, but we're gonna start coming down. Did it come down this year already from last year's payment?
If it is, it's not significant. Last year was the first year that I believe, and Melissa or Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, that we started paying both the principal and the interest. I think prior to last year, we were only paying interest. Do you have access, Melissa or Kate, to that schedule of payments on the retirement of the bonds, the debt service on the bonds?
Yes. As a matter of fact, last year we paid principal and interest. Principal in the amount of 380,000, interest in the amount of 540 something thousand. This year, we're paying 210,000 in principal and the same amount and 500 and something thousand in interest. As a matter of fact, it's on your, if everybody has the detail line item, it's on your schedule there.
Kate, would you mind sending that to us just as a separate attachment, at some point, either this evening or tomorrow morning, just to kind of for the council?
Absolutely, I can do that.
Breakdown of cost savings for the next years to come.
Will do.
And council member, the same holds true for that as my response to council member Dieguez a moment ago about not having to fund that runoff election, right? So that savings or not really savings, but not having to, paying a lower amount on the principal, it goes into the pot because the electric utility service tax is where those payments come from. So the electric utility service tax comes in, the amounts for principal and interest on the bonds are scraped off the top, and then the balance goes into general fund. So this year we had a little extra in general fund revenue from utility services. Let me see. So am I saying that correct, Melissa or Kay? Let me see.
So that is an amount that can help Councilmember Dieguez's line item of trying to get to that 20% threshold in the next coming years, possibly, right? I mean, right now it's from 380 to 210. You're talking about $170,000. I know Councilmember Rodriguez is more than a mathematician, but I'm doing the math correctly. I think it's 170.
I'm looking at the year-end projection on the electric utility service tax, right? Because it's not necessarily that it's that clean cut, because it all depends on what is the utility service tax generating. Every year it may be a little different. So there's too many moving parts for it to be that, okay, now we have an extra $100 and something thousand, because it depends on what the revenues were for the utility service tax. Maybe they were less this year, and it didn't really have much of an impact. So we'd have to do an analysis and see what the impact of that lower payment is this year, if there was one.
Okay. Yeah, because and I'm sure when Kay sends the council and the mayor, I'm sure next year will be a little bit less on the principal, because it went from 380 to 210, and then it'll probably continue to decrease once we get that.
It's a weird schedule. It's not linear. It's some, but you'll see when she sends it, the schedule of payments is not like a direct, it's not a direct line. You'll see. She'll send it to you and you'll assess it.
All right, Ed. And one last thing, not fundraising that's been done or donations that have been accepted by the committees, but not those dollars, but dollars that they have that haven't been spent. Can those dollars be, we talk about this a lot about, you know, infrastructure projects and, you know, obviously nobody got anything this year. Can those dollars, whatever surplus amount of monies they have that were not donation, can the council discuss if those dollars can be reallocated towards infrastructure projects, you know, lighting, potholes, sidewalk repairs? I know I called you today, right between Lake Patricia and there was a, you know, a pothole. So can the council, does the council have the will to decide those dollars that they can be reallocated towards infrastructure, or we want to say put them towards savings?
Oh, anything dealing with dollars and cents, the council has 100% control over. So, but what the way it happens, you're talking about committee dollars that do not get spent in this fiscal year?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Well, what will happen is, you know, we have to have the year close out. That'll happen sometime in November. Then once we close out the books and we get the audited CAFR by the, you know, late this year or early next calendar year, then we have the carryover. And the carryover is the flow of all of the pluses and minuses throughout the year. And then at the end, you're going to have an amount to consider in probably January or February. At that time, and it's something that I've mentioned a couple times, in pursuit of the 20% fund balance, my recommendation to you, to the 7 of you, in January or February, when we consider the carry forward from this fiscal year, is going to be to leave it in contingency and let it flow into fund balance, trying to get closer to that 20%. You guys can tell me to pound sand, and, you know, you reallocate it, and you know, you guys will make those decisions in January or February when that item comes before you, and you can elect not to put it in contingency, and you can elect to allocate it to some other expense, like an infrastructure expense or what have you. So that is 100% within your discretion and your purview.
And we'll have a total amount. So at some point, we'll have that total amount and say, this is the amount. And then your recommendation is to put it in contingency, but bearing whatever, if anything comes to the council that we all agree is a dire need, then we can vote if we want to use either a portion of the dollars or all of the dollars towards that, or we even have the flexibility of putting a portion, like hypothetically. And I've been saying this from a public safety standpoint, the pedestrian traffic lights. On Monrose and on Fairway, like Councilman Diaz, we have the flexibility to vote on that and to make that decision in come January, February, correct?
Yeah. Now, what I would caution against is making these sporadic decisions based on the flavor of the month, or whoever, the crisis of the month, or whoever is screaming the loudest. You're all going to have the opportunity to prioritize all of our needs during the strategic plan retreat. And I would recommend to you that, short of putting it into fund balance and short of saving the money and accomplishing the goals of trying to get to that 20%, if you're going to reallocate that money in January or February, is to keep your eye on the ball and use it towards accomplishing a strategic plan initiative after you have the opportunity to prioritize those when we have the retreat. That would be my recommendation to you.
Got it.
Otherwise, the strategic plan really isn't a useful document. We're not using it as the guide for all of us as a town. So that's going to be my recommendation. First, to leave it in contingency and let it flow into fund balance. If you want to spend it, I would recommend that you do it based on the priorities that you'll set in the retreat.
All right. Thanks, Ed, for the advice. Appreciate it.
Councilman Rodriguez, to the manager's last point that waiting for the strategic plan retreat, and again, not under his watch. There's some of us have been waiting for a significant amount of time to kind of delve into that. And I think what we're hearing is, and again, and I think the term that was used, the flavor of the month, but or whoever's screaming the loudest. The reality is that we've been waiting for several years already, and that's why we haven't addressed some of these issues like the street lighting or the traffic issues that Councilman Alvarez and Councilman Dieguez have brought forward. So if there is an opportunity to prioritize at least some of the most critical needs, and again, not having to do the entire thing at once, I'd like to explore that, even if it's in a manager's report or some other vehicle, because what I hate to see is, and I think all of us here have seen how that strategic planning retreat has been shifted, right? How it's been moved, several times. No, unbeknownst, to us who could have predicted COVID and all the other, trying to get everybody scheduling online, and then we want to wait till the new council to be seated. So I don't want to continue to say, well, let's wait to a strategic planning retreat, and then we continue to push these things further down. Councilwoman Ruano brought up the issue of PTP, and those are funds that can be used for street lighting, could be used for some of the enhancements that Councilman Alvarez and Councilman Dieguez have identified, but it comes at a cost, right? It comes at us then decommitting some of those funds that have already been committed. I think when we first started looking at that, it was 5 years out, right? When we first looked at the 59th Avenue project. So my point is, when is the estimate for the 59th? When are we still on timeline, the same timeline where we would need to have those budgets, those funds budgeted for the next 2 to 3 years out for the 59th Avenue project?
Yes, and I'll tell you why, because the biggest wild card in my short time here, the biggest wild card that I found with any of these capital projects is always the construction cost. The construction cost, these projects take sometimes as much as a decade to come from somebody's idea to the first shovel in the ground. And what I have found is the biggest question mark, the biggest variable is the construction cost. So until we get to the point where we've gone through all of the property rights issues with the eminent domain, with the negotiations with the aviation department, with the 2 slivers of land that we need on the north side from the school board and the Caterpillar, once we go through all of that, once we complete the design, and once we put out for bid the construction contract, then at that point I'd feel comfortable saying, okay, now the cloud is clear. Now now we know what all of the dynamics are. This is a humongous project. It's not a $100,000 project that a little adjustment on construction could be 5 or 10,000 here or there. This is over an $8 million project. So the variables get that much bigger. So that's why we're like mobility fee, and I've probably said this 100 times to you, but mobility fee, any new project that comes in that pays mobility, we're squirreling it away to safeguard against any surprises with regard to construction. So once we get to that point, which is probably a good 2 years or 18 months away from here, once we get to the point where we have all of the other I's dotted and T's crossed, we finally bid out the construction, we award the construction contract, at that point, I think we'd have enough clarity to consider then reallocating monies that we have targeted for this project.
Yeah, and I understand that trepidation, because we've had that bug bite us before, right? Where we thought something was going to be X and there's a dramatically different number. And then all of these years we were planning for one thing and then something completely different comes out. So I understand your word of caution and why we would be going that way. But it seems like our approach or our strategy has then taken these monies that could be used for safety, that could be used for sidewalk improvements, that could be used for street lighting, and squirreling them away. I was just trying to see if there was a way that we could, again, I know I'm popular or not popular, but I know my colleagues will get a kick out of me using the word hybrid, but is there a way that you can do both, right? And maybe some of those monies, whether it's $100,000 investment between the sidewalks, the crosswalks that Councilman Alvarez, and maybe starting the first phase of that light upgrade, could we go to that PTP money that we've been squirreling away and then continue on this very disciplined saving plan that it seems like you have a lot of us committing to here, to continue to put, because the carryover If we are disciplined with this savings, and we are disciplined in going down that path that Councilman Dieguez has set out for us to get us back to that 20%, I think there's a way that we can have our cake and eat it too, without necessarily not engaging in those, those improvements, and without necessarily tapping into additional levying of taxes. So that's kind of where my head is at so far with this discussion.
From my perspective, I just worry that we have a false sense that if we take a dollar bill and break it in half, that now we have $2 bills. We don't. Now we only have two $half-dollar bills. And that is my concern with these things, that if we take from here and then reallocate it somewhere else, do we forget that we took it from here? And now this other project is deficient, funding wise. So that's my fear. And we have multiple mandates here. Number one is we got to complete these projects. We have a great project there at 59th Avenue. It's going to be great for the residents of Miami Lakes and the residents of Northwest Dade. We have to fund it. It's a huge financial project. We have the mandate of the 20% fund balance mandate. So we have a lot of moving parts. Plus we have all of the needs that you've identified over and over again, as well as several of your colleagues, with the lighting, with the roads, with the sidewalks. We have a lot of competing interests, and it's not easy to. We can't say, we can't do magic. We can't pull rabbits out of the hat. Sometimes we look in the hat and there's nothing left in there. There's no rabbit in the hat.
Question to the manager. So although like the 47,000 and some of the savings, for example, now on the town hall payment, for example, those have been reallocated throughout the budget. So we don't know exactly where X dollar went in particular, but what areas, I guess, saw an increase in spending this year? Since presumably between that 47, the approximately 197 or so in savings from a reduced bond payment. Well, actually, I think I remember you saying that the 197 from the savings and the bond payment was kind of wiped out by the fact that we're not realizing 1.275 in franchise fee. That we're getting.
No, it was not franchise fee. It was an electric utility service tax, which is another revenue source.
No, what I mean though is that because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the electric utility tax is a general fund revenue source, no?
Yes, but how it comes, the way it works is it comes in, and before it gets to the general fund, they sweep off, and it goes straight into a bank, an amount for the interest and an amount for the principal for payment of the retirement of the bond for the town hall. So when it finally hits our general fund after that sweep, then it's general fund revenue.
But that sweep should be about 197,000, give or take, less this year, no?
Right. But I'd have to look before the sweep. I'd have to look and see the amount of revenue in that fund before the sweep. What's been the trend? Was it less than last year, more than last year? Those are the things. Plus, when you first saw this this budget, when we only addressed the general fund early on, the very first Sunshine meeting, if you remember, there were several of the state revenues, the state revenue sharing that we didn't have yet. So from then until now, several of the state revenues have come in, and then actually they came in and then they were readjusted whatever it was, a couple weeks ago or near the end of August, I think it was. So those are some of the dynamics, and that's why I say there's a lot of moving parts. It's not like we took these 47 and okay, now we have $47,000, more to spend, because we could have had less revenue with state revenue sharing, and we know we did. And the same thing happens with this 100 and something thousand that we didn't pay in special obligation bond payment because there could have been less electric utility tax even before the sweep. It helped to offset some of the loss in revenue from the state revenue sharing. So that's why I say there's a lot of dynamics, a lot of moving parts. All the revenues go into the pot, and then from the pot, we start paying all the things that we need to. It's hard to say and make a direct correlation between this one revenue or this one expense that now we don't have and it going directly over here. It goes all into the pot, and from the pot, we pay all these different line items.
Okay, yeah, no, and I get that. I guess what I was just trying to ascertain, and I'll just, rather than go down the rabbit hole of, you know, of how much an electric utility tax we were projecting and, you know, how much we ultimately are saving and whatnot, I guess then what areas of the budget are we increasing expenditures on?
Are we increasing?
Yeah, for example, are we doing more mulching this year than we did last year? Are we doing more resodding? Are we doing more sidewalk repairs? Are there any parts of, say, either infrastructure or park maintenance or anything like that that are seeing an increase? I guess because I'm trying to, you know, even though yes, there's all these fluctuating sources and all that. I mean, like again, as I understand it, the 238 that is a number that came in higher, you know, at least as a projection than we were expecting. And I think I recall, and I could be mistaken, but I think I recall saying that at this moment, it seems as if some of our other revenue sharing are going to be about flat or, you know, at most maybe minorly affected in a negative way. Of course, we kept the same millage rate in large part because there's an expectation that those numbers may or may not hold, right? Or because maybe state grants that we normally would rely on are not going to come in. But I'm just trying to, I guess, ascertain where the biggest fluctuation was as a general area.
I'll tell you that if you look at it, and if we're talking general fund, the bottom line, right? Ultimately, the amount budgeted for last year, the adopted budget for 1920. So the budget year that we're in right now was $17,359,000. The amount that we're proposing in this budget is $17,358,000. So this year's proposed budget is just over a $1,400 less than last year's adopted budget. So it's essentially, while within every line there may be some ebbs and flows and some peaks and some changes there, ultimately the bottom line of the general fund is we're proposing a budget that is $1,400 less than last year's adopted budget. So there isn't a whole lot of variation from last year's adopted budget to this year's adopted budget.
Well, I think that does answer my question as far as, again, I was just, again, between the 200,000 in savings from the payment on town hall to the 47,000 in savings on the runoff election and some other costs that, you know, have come in lower, you know, I was trying to see then if that meant then, you know, that money either got washed out because some other revenue source was lagging or actually increased the amount of money we had at our disposal. From what you're telling me, it's basically flat, you know?
Yes.
Okay. You know, the net effect of everything is flat. Okay. That's really what I was trying to get through my entire exercise. So thank you. That answers my question. And I don't really have anything else to add at this time.
Okay.
While we're on that topic, if I may, I had a couple of questions that were kind of along that same line of questioning, because the residents usually reach out and they have questions about, you know, if we have more money this year, if we have more ad valorem this year, you know, where does the money go, right? So that's one of the questions that they ask us. And in order for us to walk them through the process of, you know, where the funding goes, I had a couple of questions with regards to police contract, right? How much the police contract increased for this year, which I think is an important question to ask. I don't know if we have those numbers.
It actually is going down, council member, because because last year what happened was, if you remember the discussion that we've had before, about the completion of collective bargaining for the police union. The collective bargaining agreement that they agreed to, that the payments hit during last fiscal year, there were retroactive payments, because I think that their contract started, I don't remember. It expired, and then they had a time that they were without a contract. They kept negotiating, and when they finally negotiated, they had retroactive payments that were for X number of months.
Okay.
So last year's, got it here. Last year's actual for 18-19. So the fiscal year that finished a year ago, our expense for police was $8.6 million.
Okay.
This year's, then we budgeted in this current year, we budgeted 8.8 because that's when those retroactive payments were going to hit. So there
Okay.
are several reasons why, and now through some efficiencies in police, we're actually now projecting that we're going to end the year about $1.5 million. No, I'm sorry. $150,000 less than budget. So our year-end projection is 8.6, and our proposed budget for you now, that's before you, is just a hair under 8.6, so 8.59.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the police budget it's right in where it's been for the last 2 years.
Okay, so then that's something that isn't increasing this budget for this year. What about the salaries for staff? I know that we approved a COLA increase. So do we know how much that is as reflected in the entire budget? How much?
I think if I remember correctly, when you passed that item a few months back, it would represented like 35,000. So, and for 6 months. So if you extrapolate that out for a full year, I think it's about $70,000 total for the entire staff's 3% COLA that you awarded them.
Right, so that's minimal. Okay,
Yes.
so the police contract stayed pretty much the same. Salaries just a little bit over. Last year we didn't have the franchise fee, which is why we're in this hole that we're trying to get out of. But in this budget, the franchise fee kicks in at 1.2, right?
Right, but remember that last year we balanced the budget with those 2 transfers, and now we don't have that.
Right,
So the
right.
2 transfers essentially get wiped out by the increase in franchise. Because I think that franchise fee, we did have like 300 and some odd thousand in franchise last year, plus the 800. That puts you right in that range of 1.2, which is, so that is something that you can really make a strong correlation, and that's a wash for each other.
Okay, so then that we cannot count as an increase in this year, because last year we balanced it out with loans that we took from different accounts.
Yeah.
Now the new ad valorem that came in, that I believe that was at 351. I know that Melissa had calculated that for me like on the fly during our meeting. I kind of caught her by surprise, and I'm sorry about that.
No, I'll tell you. Our ad valorem.
I calculated at 351 and change also, but I'm really bad at calculating with the millage and the, let me see, where do I have it? Yeah, my numbers were a little different than Melissa, but it was at 351 as well.
Okay, so, and that goes back to it goes into the pot. So we'd have to now go through each and every revenue line and look at what went up, what went down, and then it's going to end up, because similar to the expense side, you know better than me, the revenue side for a balanced budget is going to be the same. So our revenues are right at the same amount. So the revenues is the same phenomena, right? We have
but some revenues went up and some revenues went down. So I'm trying to reconcile this so that the residents can understand that maybe go ahead.
If I may, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Councilwoman. If I may interrupt, if you go to page 7 of the budget message in the document that was, I believe, printed out for you, you will see a summary of all of the general fund. And in that, there are variances or comparisons from your proposed to your adopted your proposed to your amended and your proposed to your year-end projection. So you'll be able to get an idea of how certain things have fluctuated looking at that.
Right, where
I
certain
hope that's helpful.
Right, certain things go up and certain things go down. So for example, the utility, and I'm sorry, I've gone blind during COVID. I don't know what, I was told that when I turned 40, I would lose my vision, and it's very true. Communications service tax went down.
And that's going to continue to go down. That's trending down. Unrelated to COVID, that's been a phenomena that we've seen already, and we're obviously factoring for that.
Correct. So that went down by almost 200,000. So even though our ad valorem went up by 351, 200 of that is already gone.
Yes.
Okay. And then our state revenue sharing also went down by about 30, and the half penny tax that we get from the state as well went down 177,000. So all of that kind of ate into the increase that we received from the new construction. So I just want to make sure that I'm interpreting it correctly, so that when I relay the message,
Yes, ma'am.
I was the proponent of the rollback rate at our previous meeting, and I still feel very strongly about it. Don't get me wrong, I still feel very, very strongly about it. But I want to walk the residents who may be watching this meeting. I want to walk them through the process, right? There are revenue streams that go up and then revenue streams that come down. So we can't. It's not fair to say that we've gotten all this money from new construction and that now we are overspending in a bunch of different areas, because that's not the reality. So I just wanted to walk people through that process. In order for us to go to rollback, we'd have to not put money in our savings. We'd have to not fund that fund balance that we want to bump up, not return the funds that we borrowed last year. That's a different conversation, but it's not because we are spending more than we did last year. The only thing that we're spending more in is that COLA increase, which is to the tune of $60,000 or $70,000. Is that an accurate statement?
Right. Yes. Our budget this year, like I said, is $1,400 less than last year's adopted budget.
Correct. Okay. So for us to reduce the budget, we have to reduce the level of service,
yes,
which we can do that. We can reduce tree trimming or tree planting, or mow cycles at the parks. I have received several phone calls with regards to park staff and park maintenance. Since the parks have been closed for so long, residents don't understand, and quite frankly, I don't understand either, why there hasn't been a revenue produced from that lack of service. I don't believe in having people tending to facilities that are closed, having people cleaning bathrooms that haven't been used. Like I don't believe in that. I know that that's kind of the direction that we went in, because we didn't want to lay off any staff members, and we didn't want to contribute to that bad side of COVID. But that's the reason why we haven't had any kind of, I guess, cost savings in those areas. Moving forward, it's very difficult for us to figure out when these parks will be open again. For example, we have children right now that are in the Robert Alonzo Community Center, and that park is being used. It's not being used for regular activities that we used to host there, but it is being used by the YMCA for the educational pods. So there's really no savings from that facility. I don't know in the other facilities that we have, which ones are open, which ones are closed. For example, at Mary Collins, are we using that facility for anything at the moment? Are there any programs being hosted there, or individuals using the facility itself?
Danny, are we using the Mary Collins for any activities? I know for sure we did, recently we did whatever it was, the 2 weeks of early voting there.
Right.
Yes, and also staff is also hosting their Zoom, the virtual classes that we go online, we're hosting them on site at the facilities. Also staff is attending to the park grounds as well too from those facilities.
Right, the park grounds, I completely understand, but the buildings, I strongly feel that there should have been a savings there. 6 months of these facilities being closed, I think that there should have been a savings there. Town Hall was closed for a significant amount of time as well. I feel that there should have been a savings there. Are we doing anything at the spot, at the youth center, or at the Optimist Clubhouse?
So at the Optimist Clubhouse, we have 3 staff members that work out of that facility. We have the town arborist, our green space superintendent, our park manager, and actually our office specialist is out of that facility. It also has been home for the census training, things of that nature, but no actual programming out of those facilities because of the current emergency orders not allowing it.
Okay. And
we have had savings at the parks, especially with the cost of electricity, because we haven't been running for the longest time, we haven't run the sports field lighting.
Yes, there's been savings in utilities and also in janitorial at some of our locations as well too.
There have been janitorial savings as well?
Yeah, but I think one thing that staff isn't telling you, Councilwoman Ruano, is that we also had revenue from renting those parks that was offsetting those costs. And we've lost those revenues.
Lost that, exactly.
So,
Lost that
so
now.
there's no real savings when you lost the revenue that was paying for those parks. So
No, I
mean, I
completely understand, but when you lose revenue and you lose expenses at the same time, it kind of compensates. But
Yeah,
if
that's
we
why
lose revenue,
that's why we have a balanced budget, and we'll end the year more or less where we thought we were going to end the year because of that. You know, some things were savings, some things were added expenses, so or lack of revenue.
Right. No, I completely understand, but I think that some of these services should have been shut off, at least for the months that these parks were closed. For a few months, we weren't able to use any of those facilities for anything. I know that staff members were home as well because of COVID at least for 40 days, maybe 45 days. I don't remember.
No. They were. I think they were home for 2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, the time that we had closed the town hall. I think I may be wrong, but I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
Ed, I got a call, but I'm going to leave myself logged on in case I come back in time to finish the meeting. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I remembered that it was over a month, but that's neither here nor there. So I would
It
have.
could be. It's a blur. It's a long time ago.
It's been 6 months at this point. I don't even remember when COVID started at this point. So I would have liked to have seen some savings in that area. But that being said, moving forward, the only way for us to go to a rollback, or the only way for us to save to give the residents a savings, which is really what they're asking for. And I talk to a lot of them. I'm interacting with residents now more than ever. And that is what they're asking for. That is what they would like to see. And it's hard for me to justify putting money into our savings account, putting money into our fund balance. And I know that there's an ordinance that takes us there and that mandates us to do that. And I know that there's monies that we borrowed from MLOP and from our fund balance, but it's hard to justify that this year, right? When we did this last year and we said we're going to put money back, it's very similar to the franchise fee, right? We said that we were going to revisit it and see if we could increase it a little bit to see more for infrastructure. I was the proponent of infrastructure projects from the get-go. It's something that's very important to me. But during this particular year, after all that our residents have been through, it's been 6 months of struggle and sacrifice for all of us. Many people that have lost their jobs, many people that were laid off for a very long time. I would just like to see us have the conversation to really try to give them some savings. And I know that I don't have support for this. I know that it's something that I'm very passionate about, but I also understand the budget problems that we have and the fact that it's very difficult for us to do any more with what little we have, because it seems like a huge budget, but in reality, when you look at all of our expenses, it's actually very little. So I just want the residents to understand that. I would propose a savings, and we can revisit putting money in our fund balance next year when people have gotten off their feet, when people have been able to recover. Because many people, when you get laid off or you lose your job and you owe 3-4 months worth of your mortgage and your car and your electric bill, it's hard for you to get back up and running. And we're starting this budget cycle now with this in mind. So that's kind of why I wanted to see, and I know that I was the one that brought up the conversation. That's why I'm clarifying why I did that. Moving forward, I would like to see a savings for the residents. I know there's always a reason why we don't give one, and we can go through projects forever. There's hundreds of millions of dollars in projects that we would like to deliver to residents, some that are dreams and some that are necessities, but either way, they both cost money. So I would like to see us try at least this year to tighten our belts again and to try to give the residents some sort of savings. But anyway, I'm off my soapbox. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ruano, if you want, allow me to interject. I got some numbers on our savings at our park facilities. So at Royal Oaks Park, we're anticipating about a $35,000 savings this fiscal year from utilities and janitorial. About $12,000 at the youth center, and $10,000 at the Optimist Park.
Beautiful. 45. Okay. So $57,000 in utility savings.
It's a mix of utility and janitorial.
Utilities and janitorial. Thank you very much, Jenny, for those numbers. And that rolls over, that was a savings in this year that will roll over into fund balance at the end of when we close out this fiscal year.
That I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that's gonna roll
Yeah,
over.
remember, all of that is part of the pot, right? So, yeah, there's some things that were higher, some were lower.
So this could have possibly been eaten up by some other COVID expense?
Yes, and some of which we hope and expect that we will get some reimbursements. We haven't gotten any reimbursements yet. That process, as you know, with FEMA and with the CARES Act and the county is slow. So we hope and expect that there will be reimbursements. But at this point in the year, those reimbursements will probably hit in next fiscal year because we don't expect to receive them in the next 2 weeks.
Right, so they'll come in the
Right,
next.
even though the expenses were this year, the reimbursements for them will be in next fiscal year, more than likely.
Okay, let's hope. Let's hope. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Danny.
No problem.
Can I just address one thing that Councilwoman Ruano brought up, and it was relating to the rollback. Mr. Manager, you said that the loss in revenue that we would get if we gave the residents the rollback was 356,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I know it doesn't add up and it doesn't work out. It doesn't break out like this, completely. But if you were to take the 356 and assume that we did give that rollback of 356, and you divided that by 30,000 residents, not even every single resident, 30,000 residents, the savings per resident, I think it breaks down to like $11 for the year, less than $1 a month for each resident. So I know what we're saying, but it would be great if we could do that. But we have so many pressing financial needs, from paying back the money to the countless infrastructure projects that we need to figure out. Now, whether we get that money from PTP or we do from other sources, those things need to be addressed. So
no, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, but it's not $11 because I've seen residents tax trim notices, and it could be up to a couple of $100.
I was dividing it by.
I know.
So I know it doesn't work out like.
Right. There's some residents that pay very, very, very little tax because they've been around for a long time. So it's not evened out like that. There are some residents that have had a $200 increase or $100, $150. I mean, they're not huge numbers. It's
Right.
just an act of.
I preface the comment with, I know it doesn't break out like this.
Right.
I know it does not. I know that's not how it works. But I think that if you had a frank conversation with 1,000 random residents, not the residents that are super involved and talk to us on a daily basis.
I have. I guarantee you that I have.
If you talk to 1,000 random residents and you say, look, we have the option of rolling back and saving you a little bit of money, or putting that money towards infrastructure improvements in our town and investing those funds in our town, I think you will see that the overwhelming majority of those residents would pick to invest in the town and make sure that our infrastructure is where we should have it, where we all should want it to be, right? So that's just, I always harp on this infrastructure issue, and I know it's something that all of us know is an issue. We know it's an issue. What we don't agree on necessarily, and what we don't have light is, how do we pay for it? How do we pay for these things that we know need to get done? So, I obviously would not be in favor of the rollback, because I think when you compare the two, the savings to the residents versus what it does to our financial position, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for us to.
I understand, but it'll never be worth it, right? Like if this is not the time when we can be a little compassionate with business owners and landlords and residents, if this is not the right time to at least have this conversation. I mean, we can build on improvements next year. We can figure this out when things get back up and running. But I do think that the residents and the ones that I've spoken to, and I know that there's this false impression that I talk to 3 people in town. I do not. I get phone calls from all different kinds of residents. I've knocked on a bunch of different doors. People have a different perspective than the one that we have sitting up here. Because right now, their priority is feeding their family, paying their mortgage, not losing their house, not losing their business. That's their priority today. This is a different year than any other year that we've ever tackled.
I completely understand you. And if I thought that doing this, the $356,000 divided by every single resident in this town, if it actually made a difference, which honestly, if it may not break down to $1 a month.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Great. For some, it's going to be less, but
That's
for some,
oversimplifying, right? That to me, that's oversimplifying it. When it sounds like it's only $1 a month, it's $12 a year. It seems like it's not a big deal. For some residents, I've seen tax bills where it's been $200, $300.
I'm sure we can.
Not the same for everyone.
I'm sure.
The question would be, what is the town's portion of that?
No. I'm looking at the town's portion. But for the residents, right? It's a conglomerate of things, right? It's what they pay in all different areas. So I just don't want to seem insensitive to the people that we represent, that we won't even, consider it, right? And it's to put money in our savings account. It's not even because if I go to rollback, we lose police officers, or if I go to rollback, I have to shut down a park. We're talking about replenishing reserves. So that is the only reason why, for me, it was a valid conversation to have, where we can perhaps next year revisit this. We don't know where we're going to be next year. We don't know where we're going to be next month, quite frankly. So it was, I think that it was a conversation that merited some sort of, at least a serious conversation, right? It didn't merit dismissal of the fact that it's not a big deal and people don't care about it. They do care about it. And for those of us that are out in the community talking to, not people in our neighborhood, not my neighbor who can afford a new car today. I'm talking about, a lot of residents that don't, that have lost their jobs. I mean, we've got lines of people picking up food still 6 months later. We have Miami Lakers picking up food. I volunteered at the food distributions. It's not just people that are coming in from other areas. There's a lot of Miami Lakers that are still out of work. And so to me, I think that we shouldn't dismiss it. It's something that we should at the very least consider.
No, I understand, but I'm going to give you my house. I'm going to use my house as an example. And my house is very average for what the town is. My assessed value is $333,000. I would call that an average single family home in Miami Lakes. I have it right here. The rollback rate I would be paying, now this is only to the municipal, to Miami Lakes, $736. The normal, if we didn't do the rollback, $770. It's $36 for the year. $36. Now, I understand what you're saying. $36 could go a long way for some people throughout the year.
And that's very different, from example, from someone that purchased a home at Satori just a year or two ago, because their houses are appraised at double that amount.
But it's also very different for all the people who own apartments in the town that are $150,000 assessed value.
Agreed. Commercial properties are impacted at a higher level as well. They've been suffering due to loss of revenue, business closures. The argument can go either way. The argument, I'm not going to continue harping on it because I know that I have no support for this. But it's important for us to have the conversation where when our residents are struggling and our residents are in a difficult situation, we cannot continue business as usual, because that's not what we're here to do. We are representatives of them. We are supposed to try to help them in any way that we can. So that, my 2 cents, and I'll get off my soapbox. I will. This is the only reason why I brought it up. I know that I was the one that brought it up at the last meeting, and that's one of the reasons why we're having this workshop, so that we can air out all of these conversations. I think it's important not to dismiss these realities. we don't see them. We don't, because we're not personally living them. Sometimes we forget that there are residents that are struggling, still struggling today. I don't think that any one of us that's sitting here today lost their job during COVID, but there are many residents that did. There are many people that are being faced with a whole bunch of new challenges, that they don't even know what to do with. And so the fact that their council would sit and consider rolling back their taxes, even if it's to save them $30, it's still a conversation that's worth having.
But that's why we're here, right? And that was the purpose of the meeting.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that.
If we could identify the savings that could get us to those 356, then yeah, we should definitely consider that.
Absolutely.
But we can go through it, but I haven't seen the savings that we're talking about, right? Other than not funding certain infrastructure projects or certain
we would have to cut back on tree planting or tree trimming or putting the money back into our fund balance. We would have to cut back on those things to find $356,000. It's not going to be small things. It's gonna be bigger things.
Larger items, exactly.
Right.
Question is that worth the cutback?
Right. Well, everybody has cut back this year. Everybody in every household has had to tighten their belt and cut back in all sorts of areas. So there's no reason why we shouldn't do the same for 1 year.
We did it last year, and we can do it again. I'm sure we can.
Right.
But we look at the items. That was the purpose of this meeting.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And this is the proper place to have the conversation. So my only suggestion, and that's why I was asking about cost savings. If we're saving 57,000, let's say in savings from utilities and janitorial that we are going to be seeing in the rollover, right, at some point. COVID expenses should be taken care of through CARES Act dollars, because that was, we have been, I guess, expecting that. So let's think on the bright side and let's expect CARES Act dollars to cover all of the police that we've used for food distributions and for the COVID testing side and for, cleaning of the facilities or, plexiglass, all that stuff. That should be taken care of by COVID CARES Act dollars. If we have $57,000 in savings from last year and we don't put the 280 in reserves, we're already at 330. Josh had a couple of things that he was going to look at with regards to certain line items. We can come up with the other 20,000 in a couple of line items and go to rollback. Is it what everybody's going to want to do? It maybe not. I propose that in an act of good faith to our residents, it's not going to put us here or there. There's a lot of projects that are kind of still up in the air that won't be funded for 3 or 4 years, that won't be finished. We have money in parks that we're not even ready to start building. 59th Avenue is going to take a while. There's a lot of things that are going to be long-term things. This is a short-term problem. This is a today problem. So just looking over the numbers, and again, I was working off of an old budget. The new budget that was printed is very small, so I can't really see it with my 40-plus-year-old eyes. This is just like a little brief blurb of how I think that we could do it. Now, moving forward, we can look at other options as well. I don't know. I know that Josh was also working off of an older budget, so I guess some of the numbers that he had looked at aren't in this new version. I think it's doable. And I think that it shows that we care about the residents, we care about the situation that we're in. And yes, maybe $30, $50, $100 is not a big deal, but to me, at least, it shows that we're listening to what people want, and we're sympathetic to the situation that we're being placed in, that we've all been placed in, because COVID came out of nowhere. No one expected it. All right, I'm off my soapbox. Thank you.
Councilman Dieguez, did you identify those items that you discussed at the last meeting?
I didn't identify them all, but one of them, for example, was perhaps reducing the number of the community bike rides. I think that there was a total of 5 budgeted, or again, I don't have those notes in front of me since I'm operating out of my office, but it was identifying what potential savings we can get from reducing the number of community bike rides, reducing the amount, if not outright eliminating the Halloween event. But obviously that's not going to happen because they found the way to go ahead and repurpose that. about $15,000 in the council travel budgets, the 47,000 in savings from the not having to do the what do you call it, the runoff elections, which apparently that's already been pre-allocated, and then there were at least two other items that again are on my list in my office at town hall that I don't have access to at this time.
There were some committees that were rolling over, or not rolling over, but not spending their budgets last year. Do we know how much is left in there? Because I think that all committees had leftover funds.
But those
question to you,
in this current fiscal year you're speaking about?
Correct. Funding that they did not use this current fiscal year.
Yeah, that money will flow over into the carryover amount at the end of the year that you'll have an opportunity, once again, that I'll recommend to you that it stay in contingency, but that you'll have an opportunity in January or February when we consider any carryover from this year, it'll flow into that.
So that money starts to replenish some of what we would be using up here. So let's say that we say we're not going to put 280 into our fund balance come November, and I know that Mita jokingly refers to this money as November money. When we reconcile everything, and there's usually, for the most part, we have rollover funds, right? Because departments are efficient with their funds, and sometimes there's leftover monies. That would then, at that point, usually we spend it, right? Usually it comes attached to a list of items that we would like to get done, or, things that we've never been able to do, but now we have, extra money and we can play with it. That money can roll over into our fund balance at that moment and kind of put us back into the posture that we are in today. We don't know what that number is going to be today. Last year, do you remember how much it was last year?
Melissa, I think it was 100 and something thousand, or
last year was, I think, the smallest one we've had.
Yeah. And listen, we it's difficult for us to plan for that because we have to wait for the whole year to shake out, right? Even though we have invoices coming and going, we're closing out procurement contracts. So at the end of the fiscal year, then there's going to be a closeout memo that will happen in November, and that'll come before you.
Right.
Then after the new year, the new calendar year, so in January or February is when, after the auditors have looked at our books, after everything is reconciled, then you're going to have the amount that you'll be, but then that is not, well, the committee didn't spend money, but then somewhere else, we could have spent a little extra, because of COVID or whatever. So it'll shake out at the end of the year, and you're going to have an amount to consider in January or February, which may or may not, who knows? I mean, I know a couple years ago, it was like $700,000. I don't foresee that this year. So I think, but whatever it is, if it's $50, I'm going to recommend that continue to go into contingency so we can continue towards our goal.
Correct, but we don't have an idea of what the committees have left over. Like, for example, I know Cultural Affairs has not been able to host a lot of events that they usually host.
I know, but it goes back to what I've said a few times tonight. We cannot nitpick this one line and say, oh, now we have this extra, because we have to take the totality of the entire budget, right? So it's the bottom line when you look at the entire budget, the totality of all of the pluses and minuses. That's what's going to shake out, and that's going to be with.
And there's a lot of uncertainty. Another route that we can go is that we can say, okay, what is the rollback, and let's just cut every line by that number. What is it? 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever that is. Every department needs to take a cut of that amount. If you have, tree trimming to the tune of $100,000, well, you're going to do, 98. And just have everything kind of so that the levels of service don't deteriorate. It might be an unnoticeable amount.
That would be a reduction in service, without a doubt. There's no way that we.
But it would be, a couple of less lawn mowings at the park might not be a significant impact to the town. Again, I just want the residents to see that we are looking at every possible area that we can cut in, because they've done it in their personal lives. People have taken, people have eliminated, their cleaning person. People have eliminated the gardener because they lost their job. I want them to see that we're going through the same process, that we're not leaving any stone unturned, that there isn't anything that we're not willing to tackle to possibly save them some money.
Which we did last year when we took austerity measures.
Yes, yes, we did.
So I want to have an opportunity to chime in. First, I want to address blanket statements that were made that nobody up here has felt the things that happened. Just as an FYI, my main source of income was shut down for several months. I had to make the tough choice of sending people home. I don't know if anybody else had to do it, but I had to do that. But wait, let me finish my thought.
And I'm sorry, and I wasn't referring to you.
No, but let me
that was your main source of income.
No,
so
but let me finish the thought process. You know, when you invest your hard-earned dollars, that happens. You send people home. That's fine. When it comes to meaningful property tax reform, I'm the only one that's up here that's worked on that. Just here in the town alone, I've voted to roll back the tax rate twice during my tenure up here on the city council. B, I'm one of 2 council members in this town's history to vote to eliminate property taxes and to go into a different system. And it didn't go anywhere. On top of that, when I was an aide in the Florida legislature, because I do want to talk about meaningful tax reform, I worked with Senator Rubio, we pushed to eliminate property taxes throughout Florida and raise the sales tax, which would have been a savings to every homeowner in Florida of $2,300. Those are meaningful dollars that I wish we got to do. Additionally, when Governor Chris was up there, who now I know he's changed his party, but I was up there when we worked on doubling the homestead exemption. We did that, and it worked, and it saved a lot of. But I think that where the conversation has to be. We have to eliminate. I would love to see us eliminate property taxes in the town and go to a sales tax system like Senator Rubio did. Discussed back then. I want to see meaningful property tax reform because what's happening now is inequitable. And it is unfair that regardless of income, that somebody who owns a house, the same exact house in this community, the same exact house sometimes pays 3 times or 4 times or 5 times as much as your neighbor for the same service. And I think that is highly inequitable. And there has to be meaningful tax reform. I remember here in the city council, there were years where they sent out checks for $70. We've rolled back the rates. I've done it twice since being up here. We've done a lot of things. The real discussion has to be on meaningful tax reform long-term, because what's happening is, we'll roll it back today, we'll roll it back tomorrow. But the reality is the inequitable system that exists today, where people are paying 4, 5, 6, 7 times as much for the same exact service, and sometimes less, because some of these folks, just say you live in Satori, you might be getting less service because your roads aren't maintained. You're paying double taxation. So if your roads aren't getting maintained by town government, your lights aren't getting paid by town government, your right-of-ways aren't getting paid by town government, you're paying for security, yet you're subsidizing a lot of other folks. And I think that is a major, major issue. And I think that's where the discussion needs to be is how do we fix that inequitable system by keep doing the same thing. Yeah, we go roll it back, let's do it. It doesn't fix that. I want to see more of a plain, to me, it's very unfair when we see new homeowners move in, or somebody even just gives their home to their kids, and now the homestead exemption's lost. And by the way, I also worked on portability, which has been one of the best things that's happened in Florida. But that is where the major discussion needs to lie, is meaningful tax reform, where it is inherently unfair and it's becoming impossible for people to move into our community. I saw today, we welcomed a brand new homeowner, and you saw from them moving, luckily, I don't know if they use portability, but you saw the difference between them and the previous homeowner on the tax issue. That is inherently unfair for the same exact service. But I did want to make that very clear, that I felt the COVID pandemic very personally, and it's given me a different perspective. I've seen folks that work for me at the restaurant or whatnot, what they've gone through, and I've been on the streets every single day. I mean, sometimes I'll be honest with you guys, I might speak to more folks in a week than maybe some of you guys in a couple of months, but that's the type of mayor I am, very accessible. But what I keep hearing from people is that it is when they look at their tax bill and they call their friend down the street that have the same exact house, mayor, but why am I paying 5 times as much? as my neighbor, regardless of income. And I think that's where the issue lies. I mean, I'd be in favor of doing what Senator Rubio tried to do here in Florida: eliminate property taxes and have a sales tax system. I doubt that'll go anywhere. We tried that once here. Councilman Nelson Rodriguez brought that up once. I seconded, and it didn't go anywhere. Everybody showed up to speak against it. People were completely against it. But I do think that that's where the discussion needs to lie: is how do we provide real property tax reform to people overall? The burden from the school district, the burden from the county. I mean, we're providing so many services. The burden now from there was a millage rate a couple of years back from the library system. I mean, so forth and so on. So I think that's where the discussion really needs to lie: is meaningful tax reform. I want to see people save, thousands of dollars on their tax bill, and I think that's where I like to see. I mean, I wish we had the ability to levy to change that and to change it into what Senator Rubio wanted to do back then. That it would have saved people thousands of dollars a year, $2,300 a year on average throughout the state of Florida. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Just wanted to also kind of provide a little bit more context for the item that you referenced with respect to former council member Hernandez, not Rodriguez, Hernandez's item on the property tax reform. The gist of how it would function was not so much to eliminate property taxes, so much as it was to offset the amount in property taxes that you would have to charge. And it would accomplish that through a combination of charging for certain services, such as certain classes that were provided in town. And for different reasons, everyone had, from my recollection, everyone had different reasons for killing it. But that's what it was meant to do. It was meant to say, okay, if you generate X amount in certain fees for certain classes or services, like parking, for example, if we were to start to charge for that, you can use the amount you generate on those fees to offset the property tax burden. So it wouldn't have, just to be clear, it wouldn't have necessarily eliminated it the same way that Senator Rubio's item would have done, which I agree is definitely something that would have provided the meaningful tax reform. And you said something very interesting that I completely agree with, which is I often feel as if there's a burden shifting framework that goes on here, where the county and the school board every year get away with murder with respect to charging whatever they want. And unfortunately, not enough people, I think, really do at our level, do enough of a good job to let them know that, hey, the same voice you have with us is the same voice you have with these people. Just because, their main office may be at County Hall, they all have district offices that you can visit. They all have personal cell phones that you can try and obtain and call them and speak to them, emails that you can reach out to. And more importantly, the same power that they can exercise with us is the same power they can exercise with them, the power of the phone. So when I read certain comments that did discourage me a little, that said, well, we can't do anything about what they do over there because there's some other entity in a far off land, whatever the case is. The truth is that they're really, in many ways, really just as, maybe not in everybody's faces the same way that we are, because many of us work, live, and play here, whereas, say, a county commissioner may live in a different city within the district and just go from area to area, but they're pretty accessible. Commissioner Bogle had an office in PSN in Hialeah and his county office there at County Hall. He also is a frequent person to dine in our restaurants. I know that I've met with him a few times at Casa Havana, as others have. So he's been in our community, meeting many of the same people too. Again, my point being is that I reject that premise that just because they're a different governmental entity, that they can't be reached and we can't convince them that, hey, we need to reduce property taxes, right? Because again, the majority of the burden is not from the town. It's from the school board and the county. So for me, the concern that I run into frequently is there's almost never going to be a good year either to have a conversation about whether to roll back or whether to even increase to pay for a particular project. So what I've seen sometimes is that you have a lot of residents, we've all seen them, that say, why don't we do more sidewalk replacements? Why don't we do more of this and more of that? But then even in good years, when we get to the question of, okay, well, this is how we can best pay for it, it often the answer is, well, I don't want to do it that way. So then you're in a conundrum where it's like, okay, there are all these increasing demands for core services, mind you, but without the same wherewithal to actually do something about it. I agree with you, Councilwoman, that this is an extraordinary year. In this case, it's more extraordinary, not because last year was more extraordinary in the sense that it affected the public sector more, the government, right? We had a budgetary shortfall caused by a revenue source that we were not going to see for a full year, and a few other things. Here, the crisis or the budgetary constraint is now really more on the private sector side than it is on our side. So these have been 2 rough years, but again, we deferred a lot of things last year, and if we start deferring a lot of things this year, at some point the bill will come due. So, I see what both Councilmember Rodriguez and you are pointing out, but of course at some point we're going to have to make a decision about, how do we pay for these things that residents constantly demand of us, and at the same time also try and get real tax reform, either by perhaps proposing an item with one of the new state reps that may get elected next year, or by really lobbying the new county commissioner and others to, hey, we got to do something at the county level too. But I find it unfair that it feels as if Miami Lakes ourselves are constantly called upon to do the relieving at the expense of us being able to actually provide the services that we were incorporated for. So I just wanted to throw those on there or throw those thoughts on the record and to kind of explain where I was going with the whole thing about, well, how much of the $100 or so or more that residents are seeing an increase in was attributed to the town, just to kind of reorient the conversation that, at the end of the day, the bulk of the tax burden is not something that we're putting on them. It's really coming from everywhere else. And I think that gets lost a lot in some of the political discourse. With that, I digress. Thank you.
I agree with you. And for the record, I would ask this same thing of other, taxing agencies, right? We recently talked about the school board and the fact that their facilities have been closed for 6 months. And I truly believe that there should be a refund to residents. There should be some sort of rebate or savings attached to facilities being closed. So I'm not holding us to a higher standard. We do obviously have more of a control or a decision-making process on this body. But I think that all taxing agencies should really do a little soul searching this year and try to give some relief to their taxpayers.
I want to chime in a little bit on Councilwoman Morano's comments, because I would tell you I'm one of those individuals that appreciates where she's coming from. First of all, it's the conundrum, right? And we started the conversation, or at least the questions that I was asking, started really looking at what's the bottom and what's the top. We set ourselves up into this situation, right? We said we need to reach this goal in fund balance. We put a benchmark where we're trying to get, again, it's fiscally sound, it's fiscally conservative, it's putting money away for a rainy day. We've seen how that can come and help us when we have variables that are uncontrollable. The social work academy, right? The humanitarian side completely understands where she's coming from, right? Because there are people that are out there that are hurting, that they're losing their livelihoods. I know of stories, just like the mayor goes out and talks to many people. I know of people who are no longer living in Miami Lakes because of the affordability issue, right? And I sympathize with what Councilman Rodriguez is saying is, it's negligible, right? And I think that's what he's saying is it something that's going to break the bank? So to me, and just to put it back into the context of where we're at, it's a balance sheet, right? And we're trying to balance this equation out, right? How much is it that we can provide relief for? Is it going to be 100,000 back to the residents, the whole 356 in the rollback? Or how much do we need to put back into a sound savings plan, right? And to that effect, I had a question, because I know we've tap danced around numbers all night. We haven't gotten, we get some answers, but we won't know concrete what the numbers are. But we know that there's going to be a positive outcome come November or December. The November money, as town resident Mita says, right? Do we know, is that going to be anywhere close to 100,000, 200,000? I know we can't get something set in stone, but do we know what that range is going to be?
Melissa, do you have the projected ending balance for the general fund, the current one? I see the year-end projection.
It's again on page 7 of the budget message, the summary. If you look at the year-end projection, it says 221, 212.
Right, 221,000.
So every day that number moves a little bit.
Right, and I'm not holding anybody to the fire on that.
How
I
much?
just wanna-
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Louis. How much of that is potential CARES Act dollar projects or spending, like policing and cleaning of the building, and like, will we even be able to put a number on that? Because maybe that 212 is not 212, maybe it's 250, maybe it's when we get CARES Act money. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Louis.
I can get a recap and send it to you sometime tomorrow with all of the projected reimbursables from CARES Act.
Thank you.
So there is the possibility come November that we can, and not to, we can almost replenish entirely what we took from fund balance, or almost entirely replenish what came out of MLOP, or some hybrid of those two. Or there is the potential of, again, maybe it's not in the form of a rollback, but somebody mentioned in the past, I've seen, and I don't know, Mayor, you can speak to this. I don't know how that was done in the past, but there was an actual distribution that came out of that surplus in November or December that was sent back to the residents. I don't know if you or the Vice Mayor can speak to how that was done.
That was the year right before the Vice Mayor and I got on. But yeah, they mailed out I think it was a $70 check to all owners of homesteaded properties, $75 homesteaded properties in the town of Miami Lakes. We also did a rollback about in 2012, 13, that it was simply a rollback for homesteaded properties too. I remember we did that also. So those were the but I do remember that it was a check for like $75 back in 2011, 2012, but right before the Vice Mayor and I got on. And then we did one full rollback, and then we did another rollback while I was on the council. We did one just for homesteaded properties.
There was also a year where there was, I think, an excess of $3 million or $3.5 million that was used for a lot of the improvements in the parks. It was used at Picnic Park West. It was used to build the spot and the facility at MLOP, the clubhouse. There was, I remember the council discussed whether they were going to return monies to the residents or invest that money. I think it was $3.5 million in revamping the park facilities, and they went with the option of revamping the park facilities. The council was meeting back at Robert Alonzo Community Center back then.
I think those were the fees that the town was paying the county, and then the county gave it back. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Kay
Was excess monies from something, yes.
If I may also interject for a moment, from that 221, 198,700 is going to be carried forward into next fiscal year for the legal reserve. So I think that's something important to mention. So just so that you're aware.
Right, so the projected true carryover is only about $20,000.
Yes.
Thank you. That's an important clarification. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes, you're welcome.
Oh, the one question I had for the manager, just because I looked at the budget, I know this year because of COVID, I would love to do it, but I know because of restrictions we can't do the mayor's gala, which is awesome. What's going to happen with the Special Needs Advisory Board? I want to make sure they have their funding. I saw it said 0. Is there carryover dollars for them, or what's going on with them? And I know it paid for the liaison, too. So I want to make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah, that amount carries over.
And what it was 41.
Because of the nature of their funding is not general fund funding. Their funding comes from the gout.
Got it. You know the exact amount. I know last year was 41 that they had, and I just want to make sure that they have enough money to pay for the liaison and for programming.
Melissa, do you have the number?
Yes, give me 1 second.
There should have been some savings in their budget as well because their programming had to stop. So I think that some of the projections that they had, they didn't actually get to spend the money on.
I see 41,814. Not sure if that's the right number.
Yes, that is the right, that's what they were budgeted. So far, what they have spent is about is 7,000, no, I'm lying. $8,500 is what they've spent so far of that 41,000.
So the balance carries over.
Good. So they're in a good spot. We'll wait for the gala next year then. Got it. All right. I don't see any further discussion, Councilman Rodriguez. I know you brought this meeting up. There's still a lot of pending items, discussions. So, you know.
I think it was a good discussion. I think we talked about a lot of items. I don't know if we have much. If we're in much of a different position than we were when the meeting started, necessarily, which was not my goal. I was hoping that we would identify some potential savings, but I think we've all understood exactly where we're at with respect to the budget, and some potential contingency funds is at least something that we can look at to replenish the fund balance, which for me, you know, I have two priorities: the pay back the money that we borrowed, and focus on our infrastructure. I mean, that's really what I think should be our main goal. Our main goal should be to put ourselves in the best financial position possible, and to provide the services that we were incorporated to provide. You know, we have a lot of severely underfunded. Even though our budget is balanced, there's so much more that we could do. And I know there was a chart that went around last year during our budget process that said, well, if we could allocate more money towards infrastructure, this is what we could do with this much money, and this is what we could do with this much money. You know, that was eye-opening to me, because just for your instance, the road resurfacing, our current budget for road resurfacing only allows us to resurface 0.19 miles of the roadways that we have in Miami Lakes a year. 0.19. For me, that's just not enough. And it's very similar to what Councilman Collazo was talking about the light fixtures. You know, there's so many things that we need to focus on. So I hope that going forward, I understand this is a different year. I get it. I'm not blind to that fact. But I think going forward, we should definitely try to do our best to focus on infrastructure and really investing in our town, which is what our residents want. Our residents want to be the best town that we can be, and that's by investing in it. And without investing in our town and investing in ourselves, then we're not going to be as good as we can. So thank you all for taking the time, especially the staff, for this meeting. I know this was something that was unplanned, but as always, you guys rise up. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
See you next Tuesday.